What is the most shocking piece of clothing someone has worn to a job interview? A few years back, I had someone show up fresh out of the swimming pool. Hair wet, bathing suit and cover-up on, still wet. Hadn't taken the time to dry off. I went through the interview and a test simulation of the job with her. She actually did very well at the simulation. When I took her to see my boss that made the ultimate decision, he took one look and just said, no. Didn't ask about the simulation or anything, just no. And no, it wasn't a lifeguard position, it was for a small textile company that manufactures cleaning room supplies. In her defense, my boss was a complete C-word though. I have numerous stories about why he did and didn't hire someone after I did initial interview assessments. Homecoming dress. She knew she was supposed to dress up for the interview, and that was the nicest thing she had. I felt so bad, and she seemed incredibly embarrassed. It was her first real interview, and in the end I gave her credit for at least putting in the effort. For everyone asking, yes, she did get a job offer. The attire didn't factor in nearly as much as her coming in prepared, on time, and with questions. It really sucks being on the poor end of trying to dress nice, but you literally can't afford to. Over the past few months of thrifting, I've managed to piece together a really nice-looking suit for $5 shoes, $15 pants, an $8 jacket, and a $4 shirt, along with a $2 tie and $1 pair of socks. $35. I just had my first interview for a job for when I graduate college, and I was complimented at the interview on my outfit. It took forever finding a matching navy jacket and pants that both fit, but I eventually did because I can't afford a $200 suit. He came into the IT interview in polo, khakis, and aqua-colored Crocs with an anime maid blushing painted on one and lining up a sniper shot on the other. Oh, and he was late because security was concerned about his My Little Pony chain wallet. A pair of flesh-colored leggings that made her look as if she wasn't wearing pants at all, a sweatshirt that opened in the front that had been pulled to the side a bit to reveal a lacy camisole top. We work as therapists. No frickin' way she got that job. For more info, both her wig and glasses were askew. There was an odor somewhere between human and cat urine. And about halfway through, she asked if she could take a break because she left her car running to charge her phone. Well, I saw a guy come from the country club pool in an American flag tank top and swim trunks to the club's golf cart boy interview. He didn't get the job and then came back a week later in a full suit apologizing for his previous attire. Well, 2 of our 5 stories so far have swimming outfits involved for non-pool related jobs. And since we have another 15 to 20 minutes to fill, I'd wager we'll get at least one more by the end of the video. I worked in the US Senate a couple of years back. We were interviewing about a half-dozen candidates for a pretty junior position. One of the interviewees was wearing a Harvard t-shirt, a Harvard jacket, and Harvard sweatpants. We were astounded. The first question my coworker asked was, did you go to Harvard? The guy did, and he handled the rest of the interview surprisingly well. He didn't get the job, but he did become a running joke in the office for a while. I guess he was trying to get a set bonus? Well, he forgot to wear his Harvard underwear, so the bonus didn't take effect, you see. My master's student came to defend his thesis barefoot because his slippers got wet. This was in Estonia. My best friend's husband tried to explain to her that defending his thesis in a t-shirt with a Star Trek quote on it was fine, paired with ripped jeans and dirty sneakers. He's a computer science major with a focus on security. She disagreed. She's an opera singer who holds degrees in music and fine arts and did her thesis defenses in ball gowns. She made him wear a sport coat, dress shirt, and nice pants, but didn't force a tie. His entire defense panel was wearing t-shirts, and one of them was barefoot the entire time. I was the person in question. This was 20 years ago, and I just moved to the city. I was 17, and I spent 3 weeks working as a hostess at Denny's. A friend asked if I wanted to go rollerblading, so I was strapped into my rollerblades and was wearing athletic wear. She then pulled up to her gym, had me walk in my rollerblades up to the second story where the daycare was, and told me that I was interviewing for the nanny job that she heard was available. I actually got the job because the woman who owned the gym was impressed that I could climb stairs in my rollerblades. I interviewed a young woman who wore a skirt so short I could actually see her underwear when she sat down. They were pink, by the way. I gave her feedback later that she should have worn a suit. This was for a business analyst role. Everyone else was wearing a suit. Saggy pants with whitey-tighty underwear. When he bent over to sign in at the desk, you could see his whole butt, but thankfully not his butthole. Pajamas. She was pulled out of bed and brought to me and my boss for an interview. She didn't know she was having it. After 5 minutes, we offered her a job and she actually turned out really well. Back when I was an hourly manager at Walmart, a guy came in with greasy hair, white t-shirt full of holes and sweatpants. And to top it all off, he looked like he was rocking a semi. Surprisingly, he didn't smell, and his clothes actually looked clean, so that was good? But still, I gave him a hard no. Unfortunately, the overnight assistant gave him the go-ahead, because he wasn't going to be on her shift and she thought it was hilarious. This guy was a frickin' nightmare. He wore that same outfit, now never washed, almost daily. He smelled like death, turds, and cumin. And he was crazy. We were finally able to fire him after he pulled out his pocket knife and cut his coworker. Thankfully, the cut didn't cause any real damage to the kid, but seriously, what the frick? I worked with a guy who applied to the local big city fire department. Apparently, all candidates had to submit a passport-type photo of themselves, although I fail to see how that's relevant. Diversity quotas, perhaps. Anyways, this guy was a gym nut and also sent a full head and torso of himself with no shirt on. When I asked him why, he replied, "So they know I'm not a twink." Well, it must have worked, as Twinkie is now a firefighter. One time I was having dinner in a restaurant and saw a young woman come up to the counter and ask for a job application. The employees gave her one and she sat down near me to fill it out. This was when I noticed she was wearing a cap with a huge devil's lettuce leaf on it. She finished it, returned it to the counter, and asked what the follow-up would be. The employee said, "We'll contact you in a few days for an interview, and when you come back, don't wear that hat. Go spend a day in court. You'll be amazed at how many people show up to the judge in their best green leaf or rebel flag t-shirts." I have one from just last month. This guy was coming in to interview for a financial advisor program. Everyone in our office dresses very professionally, and most people I interview are dressed in their best suits. This gentleman came in wearing a stained white dress shirt with a yellow-tinted white undershirt. I kind of forget what pants, but he had a neon green and black Joker belt. "Why so serious?" was written all over it with the Joker's face. He didn't loop said belt through the rest of his pants, so it was swaying around while he was walking. He also had very long, creepy fingernails that were dirty, and he kept rolling and rubbing his fingers together to get the dirt off subconsciously. The icing on the cake was that he coughed and snorted something up very loudly, then swallowed it and loudly commented, "Nice." Somehow, this guy aced our assessment and put together a great resume, but was just the exact opposite of professional in person. We're still not sure if he was just trying to mess with us, screw the interview, or if he was just that oblivious. I just assumed he was interviewing for someone else, like Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting. Woo boy, the guy without pants. At my last job, I spent 10 months in 2017 on a research team doing statistical learning research for health informatics. It was a very large healthcare company, and they basically took almost a dozen of their PhD researchers from BI, R&D, and market dev, temporarily reassigned them to the new Center for Data Excellence. 2 of the PhDs were director or AVP level, so they got to bring a team member with them. My director brought me from market dev because of my background in mathematical modeling, but the other guy didn't really have anyone suitable in his department who he was free to bring along. So they posted the job and started interviewing. I'd do the pre-interview stuff with one of the junior PhDs and then the senior team members who come in. Anyway, 4 days into interviewing, we get one guy up on Skype for his interview, and he's way too close to the screen, like his laptop is up on his knees. We ask him to move the laptop back a bit, and he gives it up that he can't, because the lower part of his shirt has a huge, fresh coffee stain, and his pants are hanging on the adjacent wall. He'd lost track of time and rushed home, and had spilled his coffee in his hurry. We told him, "No problem, we'll find a new time for you. The shirt might be a goner, but be sure to wash those pants in hot water right away." We actually hired that guy, and I think he's still there. Great guy. Folks, I like to think we can take positive lessons away from these videos sometimes, and this story just goes to show that if everything goes to crap, honesty is probably the best policy. It might not turn out as good as this particular case, but it's generally better than the consequences of being caught in a lie. Fellow I knew was the counselor at the unemployment center. He said he had to explain to one guy he was coaching for job interviews, "Don't wear the hat that says, 'Beer makes me smarter.'" A Hegao hoodie. I must be getting old. I had to head to Urban Dictionary to figure out what that meant. Late to the party, but I had a young guy come in one day who I think was clearly trying to not get the job. Like his dad gave him an ultimatum to get a job or get out kind of thing, and he was just going to do interviews to appease him. He had his hair in pigtails high on the sides of his head with wire threaded in them so they'd stick out. Black t-shirt that said the F word on it in giant white letters. Plaid schoolgirl-style skirt, rainbow tights, and 90s chunky club kid-style shoes. It wasn't so much the inappropriate clothing, it was more the action of uncrossing her legs very wide while wearing a short skirt. Meanwhile, never taking her eyes off mine. Yeah, she was an HR nightmare waiting to happen. A tight muscle shirt. It's great that you work out, big guy, but it's not a gym. Plus, he only worked his glamour muscles. He was thick around the middle. Dude, at least give the office a show. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never had to deal with inappropriate clothing at an interview before, but, and this is probably worse, I did have to try and explain away to elected officials and citizens at a public consultation why my engineering consultant we contracted out for a portion of developing that town's strategic plan showed up in a fricking Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. The reason I gave was that he wanted to stand out and field as many questions as possible by sticking out like a sore thumb and seeming approachable. The real reason was that this was his last gig before retirement, so he had 0 Fs to give, and he had just signed his divorce papers that morning and spent the afternoon drinking at the hotel bar with his lawyer. Unfrickin' real. Nothing in his contract dictated anything about attire, since 99% of what he was paid to do was going to be done from his winter place in Arizona. He was only expected to show up to any public consultations. You'd better frickin' believe our standard contracts going forward included a clause about dress. Had a candidate come in for a recruiting role. She was young and beautiful, but she was wearing some of the tightest yoga pants ever. Nothing was left to the imagination. Her top looked very professional, though. I had the same thing happen. Young, attractive, yoga pants that seemed painted on, college hoodie. 2 out of the 5 people on her interview loop were women, 1 being a manager. And she absolutely aced the interview. Nobody said a frickin' thing about the yoga pants, and they hired her. A see-through shirt. I could make out the details of her bra. Right after that, a candidate came in with one eye in bright green shadow, liner and mascara, and the other eye completely free of makeup. Poor attention to detail. That was such a weird day. I actually got a job by showing up scruffy. At the time, I'd been working construction, trying to get back into office work. I saw a now hiring site and just wandered in and asked for an application. The person who handed me the application was nice and polite to my face, then told another coworker, that guy has no chance showing up like that. The other coworker, who was my cousin, informed the HR manager, who called me to apologize and invited me for an interview. I didn't even know what had transpired until my cousin told me later, but I said, oh, no worries. I was just passing through, and obviously I'll be appropriately dressed if you hire me. I made sure I was properly cleaned up and dressed appropriately for the interview. Got the job and ended up working there for 5 years. Had they not made the stupid remark, I might not have been considered. I had an interview for an entry-level customer service position at a large company, showed to our interview 15 minutes late in Hello Kitty pajama bottoms, a matching backpack, a bright pink hoodie, and warm, fuzzy slippers. I didn't even bother with the interview as she was late, but that has to be one of the most unprofessional outfits I've seen in my hiring experience. The other I recall was a young woman interviewing for a customer service position at the airline I was at, in an extremely low-cut blouse and short skirt, all in black. Mentioned something during the interview about how she hadn't smoked Green Hub in a couple of weeks and wanted to make sure we knew that she wasn't high. I recently watched this train wreck happen. My boyfriend's second job had just hired several new people. My boyfriend and I were hanging out at his place for work after his shift was over, and we had the pleasure of witnessing an interview. Please note that this is a pretty casual place. All the workers there wear jeans and gym shoes or boots to work. Their uniform is a t-shirt with the company logo. Although sometimes the workers come in wearing a different, occasionally nicer top depending on if there's an event or something. The interviewee shows up wearing the tiniest, tightest, sparkliest party dress I've ever seen in my life. It barely covered the naughty bits of her chest. Her entire braless back was exposed, and when she sat down on the chair for her interview, her whole bare butt hit the chair because the dress couldn't physically stay over her bum while sitting. She was also wearing 6-inch heels. No offense meant towards working girls, truly, seeing as how my best friend was one for a bit, but she honest to God looked like she'd just walked in from the street corner. The only place that outfit would have been appropriate was in a bedroom. Really, I can't stress enough just how little clothing this lady was wearing. It was truly one of those situations where you knew you weren't supposed to stare, but you just couldn't look away. There were customers there at the time as well, and nearly all of them were staring at her in shock, the exception being a couple of men who were there with their wives. Those men were staring straight forward, wide-eyed, not daring to move their heads an inch lest their wives think they were looking. Like, it was a spectacle. Anyway, so the next day, boyfriend finds out they hired her. Apparently, the skeevy old owner of the place liked her resume after all. Hopefully she remembers to wear pants or at least undies when she starts. I worked for a high-end software development firm. We wore business casual and were fairly on the casual end of that. But one day someone showed up to the interview in a bright fluorescent orange oversized hoodie, cargo pants, and sandals. They did not get the job. Look man, it's really hard work turning a prison jumpsuit into any sort of outfit, and hoodie was the best they could do in the circumstances. I do wonder who they killed for the rest of that outfit though. I was a recruitment manager for a call center, and oh man, let me list a few. There was the 20-something-year-old strolling in sweatpants that said, "I smoke green herb 420" all over them. Literally. A t-shirt that said, "I hate work." A giant gold necklace that said the B word. Leggings with way too much camel toe. An exotic dancer who came to her interview straight from work. An old man who for some reason made holes in his shirt for his nips to be exposed. A Ninja Turtle set of pajamas. A man who actually wore decent clothing but then tried to take it off and lay like a plank on the lobby floor. When he went to the elevator, he burned off his buttons with a lighter. None of this is made up. What an experience. An extremely short dress, but I ended up hiring her because she had experience. Turned out she was pregnant and coming from school, and her husband had met her at the interview site so she could change clothes, and that's what he had bought. She was so embarrassed, but didn't have time to go home and change into something else. She ended up being the best worker I'd ever hired. Don't judge a book by its cover. Well, I was the applicant, and I, a dude, had a lucky pink thong on under my pants for an interview. I got the job, and I'm definitely going to wear it again. I have a story. I work at a hotel. One day, a young lady came in asking about a housekeeping job. Our executive housekeeper was still there, so I called her office and let her know she had a potential applicant. She said she had a moment, she'd be right over. She came out, took one glance at her, and told her we're not hiring. The lady left. The executive housekeeper then told me not to send anyone looking like that to her. I asked why. She said, "Did you look at her? The young lady was wearing very tight jeans with holes in them, and it was very obvious she wasn't wearing any undies since half her rear end was showing. She had on what looked like exotic dancer heels and was wearing a halter top so tight that it left nothing to the imagination." I work in a phone shop, salesman, and we had an open day hiring event where anyone could walk in and be interviewed. We were always desperate for staff because the turnover was insane due to the job being sold as a dream while it was actually more of a nightmare. Most people showed up in their smart or smart casual wear, stuff you'd expect for an interview, but one guy had some real BDE. From top to bottom it went ripped jeans, Che Guevara top, 2 sweatbands on his wrists, and the creme de la creme, a snapback cap with the phrase, "F what you think" printed on it. What possessed this guy to think it was a good idea to wear a hat that literally calls out the interviewer's opinion of them? I'll never really know. All I do know, though, is that out of the 50 or so odd interviewees, this guy was miles above the rest in terms of how well he interviewed. As you'd imagine, he didn't get offered the job purely because of his clothing, proving that you should always at least make an effort, and don't wear a hat cussing the interviewer. I'd put in an application for my current job and was asked if I could come in and interview within a couple of hours. I was volunteering at a therapy stable in the summer heat when they called in. I told them that I wasn't at all dressed to impress, but I was willing to come in anyway. So I walked in there in yoga pants, a tank top and muck boots, sweaty and stinking of horses. I got the job. Back in ancient times when you still got an application, I walked into a Dillard's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I went to customer service and asked for an application. An older, extremely well-dressed lady was there and she asked me if I owned a suit. I said, "If you hire me, I'll get one." She said, "Go back to men's and get fitted." She was the area sales manager for women's shoes. At the time, and as far as I know still, Dillard's had a policy that women's shoes would have an attractive young man in a suit. Apparently I qualified as attractive. Her previous token had been transferred to a much larger store because he was so good at his job. Our store was kind of in the minor leagues, and she needed to get a new live-body male that day. The next not gargoyle who walked in was getting hired. I walked in and apparently wasn't a gargoyle, and the last thing she told me was, "Never come into this store in jeans again, not even on your day off." We were one step away from Disney in maintaining the fantasy. Oh, that low-cut dress. We could really see all of his chest hair. My lord, where to start? My favorite one first. A guy came in wearing a cap that had white snow and caviar on it. There was also a girl wearing Daisy Dukes, many track suits, football shirt guys, dirty suit guys, leggings that are far too stretched and almost clear on the bum women, short skirts, jeans, and the list goes on. I had a candidate show up to the interview shirtless. When I worked in retail sales, I remember a guy walking in, saluting me with an odd level of enthusiasm, telling me he had just gotten out of the service and asked for an application. He was also drunk off his mind and smelled like BO and gin. He did not get an interview. I had a man show up in a very dirty, badly ripped pair of jeans and a tattered baseball cap. He'd also decided to dye his hair pumpkin orange and pull it through the back hole of the cap. No ponytail, just contained by the open hole on the cap. A guy in a Harley t-shirt came by applying for a job. What was so special was his Harley hat and the half-smoked and buttered-out cigarette he had behind his ear. I actually thought it was a practical joke or something.
People who have been on dead people's computers. Did you find anything you wish you hadn't?
Good friend of mine had a major stroke and went into a coma. Prognosis was not good and the family made plans. Since I was the one that knew about computers, they asked me to go through his stuff and find pictures for his memorial service. 2 laptops and 10 USB sticks later, I wanted to bleach out my eyes. My friend was a great guy, but he was morbidly obese. Apparently had been renting out escorts and such from online forums. They were far from pretty, and thankfully, my friend only appeared in a few pictures, but had his clothes on. Out of about 10 gigabytes worth of images, I was able to find 5 suitable for his memorial service. The toughest part was telling his family that I could only salvage 5 photos. I told them the hard drives were corrupted. Yep, I wiped them. No sense in letting them know what I found. On a positive note, I did adopt his parrot, and till this day, she keeps calling me by his name.
I'm disappointed we did not get a name for the parrot, and I would also be pretty traumatized if I discovered my friend's USB stick full of all of his finagling with ladies of the night. Turns out my brother was writing a novel and a ton of poetry. I always wonder if we should do something with it. I'm not sure how completed it all is, but my cousin who went through it said it was quite a bit of material. I'll seriously look into doing something with this now. I'm not sure if I'll be back in the US until this late summer, but I'll see if my cousin can upload the file somewhere next time she's at my parents' house. There are also piles and piles of notebooks and journals. Again, I'm assuming are his poetry and short story collections. He told me that's what he was writing in the notebooks. Those would take a while to go through since it is all handwritten. At any rate, he was a bit of a recluse for about 8 years prior to his death. He also had some severe substance abuse problems and an anxiety disorder. So the content/background for his work might be interesting if it gives insight on what was going on during that time. My mom said something that he was looking for a publisher at one point, so it is probably what he would have wanted for some of his works. I have no idea what the brother was writing, obviously, but I think that it's a very nice gesture in a way to honor a dead family member, to find a way to publish that work to some degree, and maybe even that work could go on to inspire someone else in the future in a positive way. A few months after my wife passed away, suddenly, I finally got around to cleaning out her PC and laptop. I'd barely gotten started when I came across a file that had its file associations removed. She did all the financial stuff, so I had to find out if it was something important. Of course, my first try was Word document, and sure enough, it loaded. Yeah, it wasn't financial. Turns out she'd written a list of lifetime goals that she wanted to reach, and it had been updated only weeks before she passed. A list of about 30 things she'd dream of doing, and only about 4 or 5 were crossed off. I didn't get much done after that. So I tried to find the file again per people's request, but I was not able to locate the file. I'm not sure what I did with it. Drank away most of my memory of that time, to be honest. But off the top of my head, I remember some of the more mundane things on the list. She wanted to buy a house, travel the world, start her own YouTube channel. I remember the most recent update was that she'd crossed off wanting to meet Alton Brown, which she did at a book signing just a short while before it happened. I remember she made sure to bring her nutmeg with her in case he asked. That would probably make me profoundly sad if I found that, but I would also hold the hope that they felt the same way as the dead wife from Up did, the whole "you were my adventure." Also, I have no idea who Alton Brown is, but apparently there's some kind of American TV host chef personality.
Not on the computer, but my family found a 3-ring binder my grandmother kept. It was full of lusty love letters. We asked one of her best friends about it, and she replied with, "Oh yeah, I was supposed to burn that." Apparently my grandma and this guy had a relationship where they never actually got together, but had a lot of frisky phone conversations. None of that is quite so bad, I guess, unless you start imagining that it was your grandma. She described many details of their talks in her letters and referred to it all as her year of passion.
God damn, Grandma. Good for you, though, girl. You do you, man. Just, damn. My father died a few years ago from colon cancer. Even though I was only 19, my brother was significantly younger when we lost him. He was 7. My father and brother would watch a movie usually every other night. And a few months ago, I finally got around to cleaning his computer. I looked through his folder where he downloaded movies to, and the last film he downloaded was Spirited Away. And it was the night before he passed away. Needless to say, we watched it together that night. Good film, definitely fits the story and the whole, theme of death we got going on in this subject, but I'm more of a Porco Rosso guy when it comes down to Studio Ghibli films. That one is my absolute favorite. TLDR, dead brother's computer, possible self-deletion. Wish that I hadn't found that he had already erased his computer history. When I was 18, I took my older brother's computer after he died in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house, we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of self-deletion notes. But he never left a completed note, and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to die, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident. I couldn't understand how this happy, great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue, an internet history, an AIM log. This was back in the day. A photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange, nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to go through with it, but I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Man, I completely understand why that would be, conflicting in a way, man.
TLDR, priceless memories, creepy smut. Oh good, this story. So my uncle took buttloads of pictures just all the damn time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he died. Turns out we could have lost every single picture of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked smut. So much smut. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely smut. Now I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 gigabytes of name time-stamped videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men. We have the USB for that right this way.
I'm just gonna say, they said themselves that this uncle who died was a very organized individual. I'm sure they would have separated that stuff from those things. And honestly, it's at a certain point, morbid curiosity is all the excuse you need. It's if I found that, I'd be like, okay, how deep does this rabbit hole go? But hey, I ain't judging.
That's a goddamn lie. I'm judging everything.
My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young and it was unexpected. I helped his boss get into his computer at work and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investments, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had. Visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have become much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There are a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down and then it was over. And so now I sit at his desk on his computer using his mouse and his keyboard and do his job. I like to think he's out there somewhere, watching over me and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so at any rate. This one is a little odd because either he already respected the crap out of his boss and then found out about their common interests, but it seems more like in the way that they wrote it. Like I said, there's a lot of context probably missing from this, so don't take me as like, a hard truth or anything. But it seems like upon finding out that they had a lot more in common than they realized, he formed a parasocial relationship with a dead man. 9 years ago, not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there and people can get usernames and passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computers a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer and I had to close out inactive library cards, or ones that had paid dues. Basically, this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktop and cleaning them out. The old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he died a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life, encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy Missy. From what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want the love letters. As it were, the wife was dead and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad, because these were letters to his long-dead wife. She had died in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. Well, it might have made you sad, but it made me happy, because guess what? The greatest thing you can have is a love that transcends the bounds of life and death.
My girlfriend and I used to play Pokemon a lot. I still do, actually. But she passed away in a car accident a year ago. One day I opened up one of her games because I was feeling down and I noticed her main player was named after me and all her Pokemon were nicknames after pet names we gave each other. The thing is, I did the same thing in my game, but we never told each other.
Short and sweet, I love it, but it vaguely, ever so vaguely reminds me of the Animal Crossing comic about the dead mother. Absolutely melts my frickin' heart. God, look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. No, but I got an old computer from church once. They upgraded and donated it to us. It was filled with horse smut. I don't go to that church anymore.
I say, may the Lord have mercy on the horse smut-loving heathen that resided in that there church.
Well, I sometimes help out at a charity that ensures ladies of the night have access to condoms and can reach out to police if they suffer violence, etc. At one point, we threw a fundraiser that sold art created by a former or occasional lady of the night and showcased the art of one deceased woman in particular, who I believe was about to begin transitioning to a man. I was given her hard drive through a friend of the family that worked at the organization and asked to retrieve what I could of her art and her life. My memory is a little fuzzy on most of this, but I think her death happened in the early 2000s. She had a fairly large Napster directory, and I think it was a Windows XP machine. To be honest, I don't think I found anything I wish I hadn't. Instead, I found a trove of beautiful art and a small window into someone's life. She was both a hobbyist and a professional photographer who had a webcam she made good use of. I saw her travels to India and South America. I saw friends of all shapes and sizes, mainly muscular and heavy tattooed, and action shots of her and her girlfriend. She had an active social life, and in most ways, she was just like the rest of us. I feel odd typing it, but I would have felt very voyeuristic if she were still alive. As it were, I didn't worry much about it and instead thought of it as a very serious responsibility. I guess ultimately I found a reminder that even people who do work that's derided or considered dehumanizing by some still lead normal and wonderful lives just like the rest of us, with the same struggles and joys and trials and tribulations. I'm glad I got to experience it.
Why did I give you such a doofy voice? Whatever, this next one's kind of depressing. TLDR, found my grandfather's writing on how much he hated my grandmother. When my grandfather passed away, we were going through his computer to save off important things. We mostly saved off genealogy information, but found one very strange item. My grandfather had written a book/thesis on how much he hated my grandmother. It was about 150 pages long, had a table of contents and all sorts of hate-filled stories and anecdotes. My dad shared it with one of his brothers, and they waited about 5 years before showing it to my grandmother. I'm still not 100% certain that she ever needed to know about that book. One of my family members printed it out and mailed it to all of my aunts and uncles. My dad is one of 7. It was a huge drama fest for years. It seemed to have died down lately, though. 150 pages. A table of contents entirely dedicated to your hatred for presumably your wife. My God, the hatred in this man's heart is unfathomable. It is so strangely cruel and yet oddly sensible at the same time. I mean, he didn't murder her or anything. And plus the question is, was she bad? Was she so bad that it was warranted that he wrote this book? Just my God, this strange and yet beautiful world we live in. What the hell? Made a throwaway for this. This is my first time posting on Reddit. I had to get this off my chest. I knew my father had a vibrant internet life. He had been in IRC for a long time, maybe starting in like 1996. He had been a regular on the one channel for about 10 years. I think he was a mod or whatever the equivalent was. He talked about his online friends a lot. They seemed like great people and they were supportive when he got sick. After he died, I wanted to make sure they knew, but I wasn't sure how to get in touch with them. About 6 months after he died, I got a Facebook message. The sender said they were looking for a woman with my same last name who lived in my town. She was a regular in their chat and had cancer and they were worried about her. Approximately my father's age with the same kind of dog. The dog picture he sent was not my father's dog, but it looked similar in a photo of my father's very distinctive truck. After being in some shock, I realized that my father was doing some serious catfishing. He had posed as this woman for over a decade. Honestly, she sounded nicer than my father in a lot of ways. He sometimes had a major temper and could be a total butthole. This group of people really loved this woman in their community. I didn't know what to tell this guy. I wanted to tell the truth, they deserved closure, but if I lied and said she died, it would raise questions. Why was there no obituary, etc.? I did not want them to feel betrayed either. After thinking for a few days, I told him. He seemed really confused, but honestly not terribly upset. He said that he was sorry for my loss and hoped I would visit the chat sometime. We would keep the secret between us and he would tell the group that she died, but not the whole truth. I think this was the best way to handle it, but sometimes I regret it. I don't know what my dad would have wanted. Strange yet beautiful world we live in. Seriously, kids, be careful who you talk to online. You have no idea who you're talking to at any point on the internet. It could be anyone with any intention. They could just be messing with you for an entire decade for no other reason than just because they can. I don't know. I am honestly just shocked that this person, the online chat friend of the father, took it as well as they did. I would have to go away for like 10 minutes and process and then reply maybe.
Yeah, my uncle's laptop. We powered one up and there were all these weird selfies taken from overhead with him lying on his back. He was a gargantuan old shut-in / hoarder, so they looked really weird. And then there were all these hardcore twink smut videos and stills. This was odd because he had always been straight to my knowledge and kind of a homophobe. Yeah, I know, it should have been a red flag. And then it hit me. He was taking selfies to put himself in the picture, so to speak. Decades too late to be a twink. He was an old man trying to imagine he was young, beautiful, and able to explore something he couldn't have done in 1950s Texas. Before he died, he had become fixated on a couple of memories of friends coming on to him in swimming pools, etc. I now understand that he was fantasizing about missed opportunities to have fun. There was also an account for some kind of meetup site for guys. All old guys. I had to email the site and tell them this man is dead. We don't have a charger for the other laptop. I don't know what we'll find on it.
Utterly traumatizing. I don't know why I dedicated myself to such a stressful voice there. I was kind of trying to go for like the old lady, the wrinkly like stick of an old lady in the chocolate episode of SpongeBob, I guess. Anyway, I would be exceedingly careful about opening that second laptop. You might get Raiders of the Lost Ark if you open it.
Several years ago, a distant relative died and left their computer password protected. My grandma gave the computer to me and said that if I could pull everything off the hard drive and give it to his wife, he had a lot of finances and other important stuff on there, I could keep the computer. So I set to work, ended up just writing a script to brute force it since I had tried every combination of birthdays, pets, etc. I could think of, and my script found the correct password after 3 days. I find what one would normally expect: finances, a ton of family pictures, assorted documents for work, some fairly tame erotica. Now you might be thinking that's what disturbed me, the fairly tame erotica. No, actually. What disturbed me was that I found in a subfolder of a folder on his desktop labeled 2001 resume. In that folder was about 11 gigabytes of lolicon smut. Keep in mind this was like 2008, so that's quite a bit. I searched the rest of the computer and found no trace of real CP, so I just ignored it since lolly is more or less legal. Didn't see any reason to drop this on the rest of the family, so I omitted it from the copy I made for them. Kept a few DVDs of the stuff though in case it ever came out that he had graped minus the G a kid or something and nuked the drive. Considering I was like 11 during all of this, holy crap, that was a shock to see.
I'm aware I said earlier that, yeah, I would look at stuff out of morbid curiosity if I was there, but as a rule, I would generally rather not be the go-to guy to go through a dead relative or anyone who's dead's old laptop files and stuff. I just don't want to be in that situation. Also, what was up with the 11-year-old genius?
A relative of mine, 40M, told me this story. His roommate in university was a very quiet person. Several years ago, his roommate got into an accident. He lost pretty much 10 years of memory. One day, my cousin found a USB belonging to his roommate in his bag. He phoned said roommate's parents. The parents decided to come and pick up the USB. My cousin, not being able to resist temptation, looked through the files. He found plans for a self-deletion note, a journal about the roommate's depression, and draft of a very sorrowful please come back letter to said roommate's former girlfriend. My cousin, looking at the joyous, blissful, loving post-memory loss picture of roommate, straight up formatted the USB. My cousin told me that he believed that his roommate would be better off without these memories.
Now that is a juicy goddamn story. Now I gotta say, I've always been kind of like, is long-term amnesia really a thing? I'm sure it is, but it's one of those things where because I haven't experienced it personally, there's just a degree of skepticism I have towards the whole concept where it's like, really? The memories are just gone? It's not like they're in little glass containers that shatter and then the memory dissipates into the air and up into the goddamn stratosphere and it's gone forever. It's somewhere in your noggin, you just can't freaking remember it. I don't know, it's a weird thing. It's so hard to explain because I don't freaking have it. Hopefully you understand what I mean though, in terms of the skepticism of it. If someone told me they had amnesia, my immediate conclusion would be they're screwing with me. This was such a weird, funny topic to do. I mean, all the people's actions, I have to question some of their reasonings for keeping some stuff and looking at things and whatnot, but what a funny one to do. What does your family do that you didn't realize was bizarre until later on in life? Okay, so my mom was a pretty crappy parent. She didn't really teach me a lot and I was left alone most of the time. Most of the things I learned were from my cousin because she paid her to watch me while she would go to work or be messed up somewhere. I don't know. Never took me to an amusement park or anything. It was all my cousin. Anyway, as a kid, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and that was because my mom didn't buy me Jack as a kid. It was always my cousin getting me things and taking me places, and for Christmas I would always get really good things. Like I would get a PS2, games I really wanted, a stereo, etc. $700 a month disability money because I'm disabled. Anyways, for those reasons, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and I remember vividly kids in middle school telling me it was my mom, and I 100% did not believe in them to the point I started crying about it. All the cool gifts were from Santa as well, by the way. All the gifts my mom would get me were socks, shirts, etc. My mom also reinforced that Santa was real. Hell, I believed in the Tooth Fairy for the same same reason, since I'd get $5 for every tooth I lost. Fast forward to just recently-ish, I'm 26, and I find out all the gifts from Santa were from my cousin and her mom. They would give my mom gifts for me every year, and every year my mom would take off the name tag and replace them with Santa. I even remember her telling me how specifically my cousin and aunt didn't get me any Christmas gifts while growing up. I feel like she felt inferior or something because my cousin cared more about me and got me expensive gifts. When I grew out of the Santa thing, I actually believed my mom got me all those gifts and was using my disability money for them. Cause like every year I'd get a ton of good stuff. It now makes a lot more sense. My cousin always knew what stuff I liked cause we liked the same things. I even remember the year I got a GameCube and how whenever I'd go to her house I'd want to play her GameCube to play Harvest Moon. And that Christmas, what game did I get with my GameCube? Harvest Moon. I never told my mom I wanted Harvest Moon. It was only my cousin that knew. So I fervently believed it was Santa that knew I wanted it through magic or whatever. Really bad that my mom did that to my cousin and her mom, but this isn't even the worst thing she'd done. I could write a book about how terrible a person she is. So I wouldn't have said the mom was that bad until they mentioned that they were actively hiding the cousin and aunt were buying them gifts. That bit was like, ooh, okay, maybe she is that bad. Because not buying luxury items isn't a terrible thing. That's what it is. It's a luxury. It's not a basic necessity or anything like that. Because basic necessities, when you get older, you realize that's what matters. When you're a kid, you're all about the PlayStation 2. When you're adult, you're like, oh yes, socks and underwear for Christmas. Ooh. Maybe more context is needed, but yeah, it does sound like they kinda sucked.
To keep me from watching too much TV, my dad told me that we had a 1 hour limit on our TV viewing. As in, we paid for 1 hour of TV per day, and any more than that we would be charged extra for. Like AOL back in the day. When I started going to friends' houses where the TV was always on, I got a bit suspicious, but I just figured they had more money than we did. Eventually, after watching TV for hours and hours with one friend, I asked her how much TV they paid for, and she just looked at me like I was nuts. So I guess lying to your kids because it's easier than getting into a fight over a rule you want to enforce is the bizarre thing my family did.
I'm of two minds on this one. 1, obviously it's not good to lie to your children. 2, I don't blame them if they wanted them to get away from the TV and go out and be active and stuff, because a prevalent issue nowadays is people having too much screen time. Like, I see some parents out and about, they hand their babies mobile phones and stuff. It's like, what the hell? I understand if they've got like learning programs on there or things specifically for them, but I just don't think it's very good for their development. I don't think kids should be raised on technology. I only got a phone. Granted, I got a phone in like 2006. I got a little flip Nokia. It was a basic phone. Had nothing else, that's all I used it for. But now I just feel like phones and tablets and stuff, when they just hand it off to their kids, it just feels like they're trying to distract them and not engage with them or teach them anything themselves. You're supposed to be there for them. You're supposed to engage with your kids, for God's sake. Anyway, that's just a little rant I've got, I guess.
Having no shame being nude. At least in America, that's weird. Granted, my father was not wandering the house nude as he has all daughters, but my mother, 0 craps given. My sister, mom, and I just have no shame. I'm eating breakfast. Mom wanders into the kitchen naked to do her neti pot thing. I'm trying to take a bath. Here's mom or sissy trying to have a conversation. Walk into mom's bathroom. Literally every door leading there wide open. Mom taking a bath. Stop and have a chat. Same with my sister. I've had so many damn bathtub conversations with my sister and mom. Also, my mom's total nonchalance about being naked around my best girlfriend. No, they weren't uncomfortable. She asked or warned them. She just wanders around naked sometimes. So now I'm just always naked in my own home. Blinds open or not, I literally just don't even notice. Being nude is just my inherent natural state.
I mean, TMI, but if absolutely no one is around and whatnot, yeah, it's pretty nice to walk around in the nude, but like when there's company about, it's like, well, it's a bit weird, yeah, like that's my standard, you know, I'm not gonna enforce my standard on people, but, you know, kind of weird.
Yeah, my boyfriend found this super weird and gets upset that I don't close the bathroom door all the way. He had 4 cats and my parents had 4 daughters with 1 bathroom. Privacy while you pooped was just not happening. I'm almost 30 and still find myself wandering into the bathroom while my mom's doing her thing when I visit to chat. It's just our normal. Also, my dad never wore pants when he was home. Tidy whities and a shirt is how most of my friends met him. I remember one of my sisters pleading with him to put on pants because her boyfriend was coming over, And he was just like, I pay the mortgage. I don't have to wear pants, which has become my life creed.
You heard the man, love. He pays the mortgage. Now, I agree, though. When company is coming around, just put some freaking trousers on. Here's the thing. Here's the rule. Shirtless, all right. Pantsless, nah, that's a no-go. Not when company's about.
When I was younger, my whole extended family, except the ones in Germany, would share a farm together and go there on the weekends. We would spend the whole day weeding, raking, other chores, and goofing off outside. And at night, we would eat only potatoes and gravy, and the men would drink beer. After that, all of us kids would go into the living room and watch VHS tapes of adult movies that were probably too inappropriate for us to be watching at that age. We would do this till 11 while the adults talked and played games, and then we would all go home as my grandmother and grandfather were the only people who lived there permanently. That farm has been in the family for a long time.
That sounds like a damn good time, a hootenanny even. I'd love to go to a farm and, get drunk with my relatives, talk, play games, drink beer. I mean, maybe not beer, I'm more of a cocktails guy and all that. Or watch inappropriate movies and stuff. I don't know if he meant, adult movies or he meant more just inappropriate films for kids like Final Destination, or as I would be watching when I was 10 years old, From Dusk Till Dawn. That's a great film. I freaking love that movie.
My mom would let me and my brother run around naked for about 10 minutes before our bath, around ages 2 to 3, so we wouldn't want to take our clothes off in front of company, because she read that some titlers do that, but creating a time to be naked stopped it, I guess, and she didn't want to risk it or something. And she also would give us our popsicles in the bath or shower until we were about 4, so she could just hose us down and we didn't get everything sticky while eating.
I don't actually blame her. Lollipops, anything like a popsicle or a lollipop, you gotta be careful with kids. I know until the age of 5 or 6, I think, I could not be trusted with a lollipop. I would get sticky. I'd be holding it at arm's length, and then next thing I know, what the hell's going on with my hair? Why is my hair sticky? I didn't put it anywhere near my head. My hair's all sticky, and my mom and my brother would be all, get your rollers out, Edna, because I had long, gorgeous blonde locks, and they'd get all curled up and sticky and horrible. I'd hate it. I'd cry even. When we watched movies, we would discuss what was happening, what we thought of the characters, or just random things that we thought of during the movie. When I would watch movies at my friend's house, they found this very annoying, and I didn't realize people just sat in complete silence for 2 hours. I have since broken the habit, mostly, but when I meet up with my family, it's the same as it used to be. I also do this with very specific people that are down for it. I have a friend who I watch a movie and a bunch of anime with on weekends and stuff. When we have the time, we get together, we just watch random stuff. We've been watching Back to the Future. We recently watched Homeward Bound, which was a lot less sad than I thought it was gonna be. He wanted to make me cry. And we just comment on things, make jokes every now and then. It's just a thing that we do. Otherwise, though, I am perfectly fine to sit in complete silence while watching a film. Cult stuff. I didn't know it was a cult until I became an adult, grew up in a Christian group. They had their own church and school. I wasn't allowed to talk to people from outside both church and school my whole childhood. Even neighbors I got in trouble for. This is the kind that teaches you homosexuality is evil, Pope is evil, Obama is evil, Trump is evil. Hell, I got a detention for using female hair products because it was gay, and that was 2011 in Canada. It was crappy, I guess, but the time I tried to self-delete with a bottle of whiskey, my parents' response was to ground me for life because I went and partied. I told them why I did it. They sent an elder from the church to talk to me, and the grounding remained. They had their own business too, so at 16 you'd work and get paid normally for the church folk. Being an adult, I left, but I had no clue just how sheltered it is, and how crazy sheltered I was as a kid. 20 is when I got away, and it was like this magical adventure world where nothing was like it was supposed to be. That sounds like utter hell, and although this was about Christianity specifically, I want people to remember no matter what part of the political or religious spectrum you are on and what you believe in, if you are too dedicated to a specific ideology in which you put it before the people around you, the people that care and love you, you're going to taint, corrupt, and hurt those around you, and probably just ruin any impression that people have of you and what you believe in, and that goes for everyone.
Not brushing teeth. We were never taught to actually make a habit out of brushing our teeth growing up. Our parents didn't either. We used to get shown those fun educational videos in school when we were kids. The ones with the big cartoon toothbrush who tells you how to brush your teeth. But I never actually took them seriously. I thought toothbrushing was just something people on TV did, not an actual real thing, until my first sleepover with a friend around 5th or 6th grade. We were getting ready to go to sleep and I looked at her like she was crazy because she was actually brushing her teeth. And she looked at me like I was crazy because I wasn't brushing my teeth. I didn't have many sleepovers as a kid, so I just put it down to sleepover weirdness and carried on not brushing my teeth until I started getting tooth pains in my late teens. Went to the dentist. He asked when the last time I'd brushed was, and I swear he nearly fainted when I answered. Safe to say I brush my teeth now, but a less gross one, maths. When my siblings and I were little, our mother used to make up maths worksheets for us to do. She'd sit down and handwrite a bunch of simple, real simple, we were kids, maths questions down. Give us a sheet each and just let us work through them. It wasn't forced or anything though. We never had to do it, but we wanted to. It was like a game to us. We'd ask her to do it for us. I didn't realize that not everyone's mother would do that or read to them each night before bed. Even my first teacher commented on how much further along my reading was than the other kids when I first started school. I thought this stuff was standard until I started talking to other kids about it and realized nobody else in my class did it.
Save for the disregard for oral hygiene, which, by the way, kids, seriously, brush your teeth every day. Make sure your mouth is clean and healthy. It is important. You can get sick, and I think in some cases you can even die if your mouth is, like, really badly kept. But that's the extreme. And on the other hand, though, these parents are clearly engaged in wanting to teach their kids stuff. I mean, that's a problem that I've talked about before, I think. A lot of parents just aren't engaging with their kids and actively trying to teach them stuff. I have a close personal friend who was a primary school teacher for a while, and she told me about a couple kids who didn't have, like, major learning difficulties or anything, just didn't know how to wipe their butts because their parents just didn't bother to teach them how. Neglect is a form of abuse, people.
When I was a kid, we opened all of our Christmas presents after dinner on Christmas night. All of my friends opened them on Christmas morning or sometimes even Christmas Eve. But we waited with all of the family, including grandparents and aunts and uncles and the whole damn fam. Dinner was eaten, dishes were done, drinks were served, and we all sat together for several hours and opened Christmas presents. I don't do that with my own family now, but I do kind of miss the tradition.
I frickin' love Christmas. Christmas frickin' rocks. I'm not like fanatical about it, but I like it. I love the atmosphere, the snow, the goodwill, and cartoon Christmas specials back in the day absolutely rocked. My mother is a member of the Slavic pagan cult. In my childhood, there was nothing strange for me in bloody sacrifices for different gods. It was a bit of a holiday for me. In the courtyard, we had an altar where mother often performed rituals. However, in the end, my father could not stand this pizdiets and broke up with her. But now I can easily write fantasy books on the knowledge that I received in my childhood. I even tried in Russian. I am from Russia, but I am not very good at composing stories. And no, it had no effect on my mind. Unless I'm not so worried because of blood, death, etc. I am not cruel. I have quite normal relations with people around me. Now I am 22 and I am IT student, and of course I am not pagan. By itself, the sacrifices were hens, pigs, and other livestock animals. Most often they were not for the fire god, so most often this event ended in a feast.
I actually once went on a date with a woman who claimed to be a practicing pagan. I mean, paganism itself is an umbrella term for a few different things that have either been discarded or forgotten, and people don't really talk about that much openly, but I don't know, the whole concept seems kinda cool to me. All different gods respecting nature and all that.
I don't know if it's bizarre, but my parents had arguments in front of us when we were kids. Not knocked out, drag out fights or anything, but they disagree and hash it out verbally, sometimes loudly. Now that I'm married and have grown-up friends and such, almost my entire social circle never saw their parents argue or fight.
I'll be honest, I have witnessed some awful arguments and fights between my parents, but I do know someone whose parents literally never argued in front of them, and they are
simultaneously the least confrontational but also most dangerous person I know, because they literally study the way of the blade. They do Bushido stuff. The man can roll into a stance while holding a samurai sword and slash that thing out smooth as butter. I have held his katanas. They are authentic and sharp, and I also had the honor of attending his daughter's christening very recently. Confrontation is an inevitable thing, people. You should be prepared for it in all manners, whether it just be an argument or whether it be someone actually trying to cause real physical harm to you. Because some people just freak out over the most mundane things, and you know what, maybe that's part of the reason why. Your parents didn't argue enough in front of you. It's a regular thing that happens. Arguments can sometimes be the way that you can solve problems. I had a less than traditional upbringing due to my 2 juvenile delinquent older sisters, but despite all of that, my family has always been very full of love. Every goodbye or goodnight was always accompanied by, I love you. It wasn't until I started dating my now husband that I realized not all families do this. He'd get off the phone with his mom and just say, bye, and I'd be shocked at the rudeness of it. He's adopted the habit with me now because I've never stopped. I've always felt loved by my parents no matter what was going on because of the constant effort to remind ourselves that we love one another. Solidarity, sister. I literally do the same thing with my family and even my very close friends. I believe that anything can happen. I could be snatched from this existence at any point for any reason. So I let those around me who I truly, deeply care about know that I love them, even if it might be a bit embarrassing for them when I say it to them in public.
I just realized today, probably not that strange, but my family would go to the movie theater when we knew it was going to be a rainy or stormy day. We would go see a movie and then look at the weather, and if it was still bad outside, we would just hop into another movie. I never knew it was wrong or anything. I was like, sweet, we get to watch more movies. Never got caught as I remember, but I'd never be bold enough to do it now.
Sneaking into a film isn't the worst thing I can think of, but I have never done it and I don't intend to because I have a lot more respect for my local establishments. Because the fact of the matter is, people, if these places don't make money, then they just disappear. And then suddenly, oh, you live in a food desert, or oh, there's nothing to do. And then a big shadowy corporation buy up the property for a cheap price and then build houses. They own the houses, price up those houses, and people can't actually afford to buy them, and then they're renting those places forever. Men were considered inferior and violent. We weren't allowed anything resembling a weapon, including army men. Weren't allowed violent toys, no sugar, very rarely allowed time with friends. Most mornings I'd wake up to find I was grounded for one reason or another, along with my brother, and we were locked in the room all day. Food and water twice a day, bathroom at the same time. No blinds or curtains, no beds. We were allowed a mattress. If we were allowed outside, it was to do chores, usually the more physical ones like weeding or picking up rocks. I still have panic attacks if I feel trapped. When I stayed in the hospital overnight last year, they were kind enough to help me walk around so I wouldn't stress out, but it was a bloody awful experience. Anyway, I assumed all families were absolutely horrible and this was pretty normal until I actually spoke to people about it. My grandmother raised me, and I keep this light orb thing I made of her ashes as a nightlight to remind myself that even the worst pieces of crap can be useful. I defer back to my comment earlier about how extreme ideologies can really corrupt, taint, and harm people around you. But always remember that you have the opportunity to be better than the people that hurt you.
Happy one. My parents combined their last names without a hyphen, so we have a unique name. It took me a while to realize other people existed with my friends' same first and last names. It really weirded me out. Mildly happy one. I was raised not to argue with my siblings, and it was forbidden not to get along, so we got along. Not as happy. I thought everyone's parents would just take random bins of their precious things, including clothes, pajamas, toys, books, etc., and put them in the basement and never give them back, even when they said they would. Very unhappy. I thought everyone's parents would scream at them if they ever asked why they were doing something or ever said anything the parent didn't 100% agree with. Maybe everyone does do this, though.
Well, that certainly went from happy to sad to me lamenting that some people just should not be parents. Obviously, this person's parental figure lacked any and all emotional maturity where they couldn't even handle their child disagreeing with them.
I grew up in a Christian subculture known as Mennonite. A lot of the ways I was raised would be considered bizarre bizarre. No TV, no internet until I was in 6th grade at least. No going to the movies, bowling alleys, or skating rinks. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. And no other worldly styles such as Christian rock, rap, etc. My mom wears long skirts and a covering on her head and is often mistaken for either a Catholic nun or Amish. We had a whole laundry list of do's and don'ts. At the time, it didn't seem bizarre because that's all I knew. Of course, I knew others were different, but that was of little consequence to me. That said, I value my upbringing. I was raised with a strong work ethic and a fantastic moral foundation, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I like that this guy takes the bad with the good. He doesn't directly deride the Mennonite thing or even say that he doesn't live by it anymore. It's kind of up in the air. He doesn't say. But I think that this kind of calls back to the guy who doesn't brush his teeth, but yet his parents still taught him maths and English and stuff where they're clearly engaged with him on a level where it's like, yeah, those parents are good people, and yet they have a blind spot. They just didn't care about oral hygiene. But it doesn't mean they don't love them or anything like that. I mean, kids, here's the thing. You're never going to have all the answers in the future. There's always going to be a blind spot or you're going to mess up or something, and that's the way parents are. It's just a fact. My mom raised me on her own. I remember realizing that, wow, my mom doesn't actually know what she's doing. She's just doing her best. And I've turned out okay.
When my little brothers were babies and they needed to poop, my mother would pick them up, plop them on her lap, and hold them over the trash can in the kitchen. So she'd just be sitting on a chair with the trash can in front of her, letting their turds plop out their butts in full view of us. It's a lot easier than cleaning a dirty diaper later. The weird part is doing this even when I had friends over. They don't come over anymore.
Maybe it's because you sound like a little gremlin, man. No, kind of gross, but I understand the logic. I just, learned to wrap a nappy, though. There's a road tunnel about 20 minutes from where we grew up. It's about 2,000 yards long, and when we drove through it, we all had to hold our breath. No other tunnels, just that one. I thought everyone did it and was surprised when I found out they didn't. Also, if you bring someone a present from your holiday, it's referred to as a rabbit. Again, I was surprised that it's just our family that does that. This isn't a family thing, but when I was a kid, I used to hold my breath whenever I saw like a character in a cartoon or a video game underwater and try to hold it for as long as they're underwater, because my logic was if I can hold my breath for as long as they can underwater when I'm in this situation, I'll be fine because I've been practicing. No, it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't work like that. I remember doing it while watching the Tarzan cartoon. I think it was the episode where Clayton's sister comes and wants revenge for her dead brother.
What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see? My severance check. Apparently someone at the payroll company addressed it to me instead of HR, opened it at my desk, and laughed. Packed up my crap, and left. I found a letter between my parents back when my dad was in the army 10 years before I was born, when cleaning out the house. He was saying how they should get a divorce because it just wasn't seeming to work out. When I was 16, they did end up getting a divorce. And I have never spoken to them about it. Leaving work late one evening, I saw the HR director and CFO in a dark office shredding papers. No, that's not a euphemism. I didn't say anything, but quietly walked on down the hall. 2 weeks later, we were raided by the SEC and several people were charged with cooking the books. Sounds like some Wolf of Wall Street stuff going on there. Back in 1997, I started work at a new job and took over the office of a salesman who had recently been fired. I was in IT using the same computer that had been set up for sales. My first task was to install all the software I'd need. The computer hard drive was almost full, so I poked around and found a ton of folders filled with smut. Went to my supervisor and he said to delete it, warning me that the salesman had been fired for downloading smut. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding secret smut folders on the company's network. Not only had he downloaded enough smut to max out his computer's HD, he had the network at about 90% capacity. When I was done deleting all of the folders I could find, the server capacity was less than 50%. Dude was seriously addicted to his smut. I wouldn't have just fired him. I would have booked therapy appointments on his behalf. Worked for a downtown metropolitan hotel for a long time, and I've seen a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to see. Probably the worst was a kid with an old man. Checked this guy in at 1 a.m, not uncommon because people travel at different times, but he was alone. Like an hour later, he asked for something like a towel or blanket. Anyways, we dispatched our runner to deliver it. After the runner comes to me and says he thinks something is wrong because he
caught a glimpse of someone and the old guy was trying hard to block the entrance. Being that we were supposed to take stuff like human trafficking seriously, I asked our maintenance guy to cut his power so we could get a call to come up and try to fix the problem. He does, and I go up with him to apologize for the inconvenience because the guy was a member. Sure enough, we hear a kid in the bathroom hiding. Try to ask who the kid was, and the old guy tried everything to shut us down, from throwing his status around to bribing. We called the cops and we let them deal with it. Just 2 days ago at a community pool, a teenage couple who entered into the pool area went into the hot tub, stood up to stretch my legs and looked over to, well, SX in the hot tub. It was midday. I cringed pretty hard, but I laughed even harder when the neighborhood cop showed up. I once arrived early to pick up a girl for a first date. She was renting a small garden apartment behind a bigger house. It was just after dusk and I walked around the corner. The sliding door was standing open, and she was inside walking around, brushing her hair, wearing only her underwear. She did not see me, so I just walked back around that corner and waited another 10 minutes. When I walked around again, she had a dress on. I never told her. The date went well, and I only got to see her underwear again several weeks later. When I was about 16, snooping in my parents' wardrobe, I found a diary written by my mother when she was 14 from the year 1970. Read some beautiful and brilliantly written entries about meeting and dating my dad, who was 16 at the time. Had to read a little between the lines in some slightly later entries as they were written with such flowery language. In one such entry, all of a sudden, she discloses that she's had an abortion, performed by one of my relatives, an anesthesiologist, and she has never told anyone. This is the reason that you don't poke around in people's diaries, because you might find something that you never wanted to know. I was in elementary school playing basketball. I shot the ball, but it ended up going over the fence onto the other side of what was someone's backyard. My teacher requested that after school I knock on the door of the house where the ball had landed to get it back, and so I did. I did not expect a woman wrapped in a towel with one of her nipples revealed to answer the door. I was shocked, but carried on with my mission. For those wondering, she stated she did not have the ball. Back when I was a teenager, we hosted a New Zealander at our house for a couple weeks. Guy gets to our place after the flight, and about 10 minutes later, I'm walking around my house to see where he's at. The door to his room is partially open, and the dude is laying face down on the bed and humping the ever-loving hell out of a pillow. I backed away slowly, like Homer when he saw a poo cheating on his wife. I felt bad for the pillow. My mom gave me an old laptop of hers when I was about 13, and I was scrolling through random pics she had left on it of my little brother's football game, and then boom, nudes. Years ago, a colleague had an old smartphone that he brought in to give to another coworker as theirs broke. The phone was sitting on the new owner's desk, but she hadn't yet tried it out. As it was still charging after months of not being used, we were talking about how cool it was of the coworker. Smartphones were not widespread yet, and I picked it up to see how it felt in my hand. I pressed a button, and the first thing that I saw was a Google search for lump on anus. I quickly put the phone back down. This must have been the last thing he searched for when he last used it a long time ago, and forgot about it. When I was 11, I walked into my mom's bedroom and saw my mom and her husband doing everyone's favorite number, and we never spoke about it. Years later, when I was 24, she walked into my bedroom and saw my boyfriend naked. We never spoke about that either. All probably for the best. My dad's Alcoholics Anonymous chips. Learned it's why my parents got divorced. Proud of him for being in recovery, though. When I was a young teen, I was once leaving my house to go do something in the neighborhood. As soon as I go out of the door, I heard my parents at the garage. My mother seemed to be in her car, and my father was sitting down behind her car and pleading with her not to leave. My parents were divorcing, and I saw a few scenes that I wish I never had. Not really horrific, but seeing your parents in emotional pain can be rough. No doubt, no doubt. The code to open all the doors in my primary school at the time. A lot of power to open any locked door for an 8-year-old. I don't know about anyone else, but I remember being a kid and being like, looking at the chain link fence in my primary school and going, I could climb that, I could escape, wanting to escape, thinking about escaping, but then I'd always chicken out and be like, oh God, but what would the consequences be? Am I going to get in trouble with the teachers? What would my mom do to me if I ran away from school for a day? Like, 8 to 10-year-old me, what are they going to do? I'd go straight home. And what would happen then? My mom would probably walk me all the way back to school, and it would just be a massive waste of time. I do conventions and corporate events for a living. Was once called into a room to fix a power cable. It was a meeting of a worldwide, well-known house paint manufacturer. It was a closed-door meeting, and I had to be let in to do my job quickly. They didn't stop talking as I did my work. We've pulled all the units from production and recalled all units on the shelves, but the ones still in transit cannot be recalled. They might be caught when they reach the sales floor if the retailers are still watching the recall, but it will have been weeks since we issued it. The guy who then responds to that states that they can prove they did their diligence in court with the recall, and any units sold to consumers will be the retailer's fault. I never did get to hear what the recall was for, but they seemed pretty tense about it, legally speaking. So I doubt it was quality control. I felt like I had witnessed the mafia talking about a murder. The owner of the club where my sister worked took an armload of shotguns out of his truck. It was about 3 a.m. and I was parked behind the bar waiting for her. The reason I know he didn't mean anyone to see is because he covered them with a tarp and he gave a good long stare around when he got out. Shady dude. He was up to every kind of no good. I literally scrunched down in my seat. I accidentally found someone's notice of performance improvement plan on our company open access SharePoint site. Went straight to my manager so they could quietly inform the manager of the person and have it removed. The person on the performance plan quickly became a top performer and closed the second biggest deal in the region. Not long after, their manager was replaced. Maybe they were always good. Maybe they saw the improvement report and thought, damn, I need to get my affairs in order. And they did it. In spades. I used to work in the basement of a pretty large hospital doing engineering work. They'll often cart dead bodies out of the hospital through the basement, so it's usually not a big deal. You tend to try and ignore it. One time, as I was finishing up a test in a pretty remote room, I walked out to an entire security detail escorting a body. I just got immediately shoved back into the room, so nothing really exciting happened, but I always wondered who that could have been. My third job I had at 17 was at a pizza place. I had 2 managers, one male, one female, and they were both married to other people. Well, I went to hand in my drawer at the end of the one shift and walked into the office, and there they were just making out with some heavy petting. Their spouses found out. They left their families, and then those 2 managers got married to each other. As far as I know, they're still together. Also, no, I didn't tell their families. I was 17. I didn't even know these people's spouses. Their families found out because they told them themselves, because they both wanted divorces from their respective spouses. I tend to have a way of finding things out that I'm not supposed to due to my inquisitive nature, but one that comes to mind was when I left my last job. My general manager wasn't exactly a warm, woolly person and was not pleased that I was leaving. I had to get something out of the manager's office and saw my name in an email on the desk. She had told the other 2 managers to wish me the best of luck in my future career and that I would be missed. I was shocked because she actually took the time to send that out to them. Never heard that from any of them, but seeing it showed that she actually cared. Whenever I meet or hear someone say, I am an inquisitive person, I have an inquisitive nature, I just think, you're bloody nosy, which is hypocritical because I'm nosy too. On my way to work in the morning one day, and I'm on a train leaning up against a glass partition between 2 seats. The lady on the other side was doing the same thing, and as her mobile kept pinging with incoming messages, my attention was drawn to it, and because of the angle, I could see the text exchange. To summarize, she offered services of the scatological nature, and the person on the other end was complimenting her on how her mess didn't stink, and I'm going to leave it at that. Definitely not something I should have seen. What everyone made in my company salary-wise, CEO and all high ranks included. It was a very detailed Excel file meant for the owners of the company. For every tier you went up, that salary pretty much doubled. I was 12. I was trying to make my BMX bike into a long-forked chopper-style bike. There was an old man down the road that welded as a business. I had dropped my bike off for some welding on my forks. Went back several days later to pick up my bike. Walked into his shop just as another man pulled an enormous bag of the devil's lettuce out of a duffel bag. They both stopped and just stood there, staring at me for a moment. I turned around and noped the hell out of there. The men then proceeded to look at each other, say, well, that was kind of awkward. See you in a month or something? I suppose depending on the year and place that this occurred, it would be more or less worrisome if someone saw you do a handoff with a big bag of the devil's lettuce. Back in high school, my friends and I used to skateboard in a church parking lot. One day we're hanging out and this car comes tearing into the parking lot and drives over to a secluded corner. A lady gets out and goes to her trunk and pulls out a gun. We think she's about to delete herself, but then she notices us standing there. She paces back and forth a few times before getting back in the car and leaving. As soon as she left, we went across the street to a convenience store and called the police. I think this might be the first story where someone was like, I witnessed a crime, and then actually went on to call the police instead of burying it in the back of their mind and, posting it on the internet. It might not be the kind of answer you're looking for. A teenage boy's hands, skin, and muscle essentially degloved. I was visiting my folks when the kids came up to the front door, knocked several times, and then promptly collapsed. He'd been riding a go-kart at full speed when the chain broke, wrapping itself around his wrist. The kid survived, but totally lost his hand, amputated. I was a little kid and I went looking for something in the house. Opened a closet in the basement that I usually never looked into and found a huge stack of Christmas presents. Walked over to them and saw they were all from Santa. What the actual heck? Why would Santa deliver presents 2 weeks early, and why would he leave them in the basement closet? Oh. I used to work on oil rigs, and one stormy night I had to go to the cellar deck, the lowest level of the rig, to do a repair, and I caught the safety officer and the production supervisor opening a separator valve and emptying the contents, oily water, straight into the sea. They obviously chose a wintry, stormy night to do this so that by morning the oil would be elsewhere. My wife and I vacationed to London a couple of years ago. After dinner, we decided to go out to try some of the local pubs because, London. We didn't want to go to the tourist trap places, so we followed around some locals. It was about 11 p.m. when we got to the last pub. It was a nice looking place with a younger crowd. I really had to pee, but I couldn't find a restroom anywhere. I walked up to the guy working the front door and asked him where the restroom was. He looked at me kind of funny and said, "Upstairs, first door on your left." I thanked him and scurried back into the bar. The staircase was in the back left corner, blocked by a table. I found it odd. I had to ask the group sitting at the table to move to let me slide by. They thought it was strange too by the looks on their faces. You could tell that these stairs weren't meant to be used, but I had been drinking and my bladder was about to bust. As I reached the next floor, there's a long hallway with about 5 doors. The bouncer had told me it was the first door on the left, so I tried it. Nope, it was a dark room with empty kegs. Pretty normal, maybe he meant the right door. Nope, dark room with extra supplies. I started to wonder if I was too drunk to follow directions, but then I noticed I could see a light under the door at the end of the hallway. That must be the bathroom. Or so I thought. I opened the door to find a group of people in very sharp business attire seated around an oval table. They were clearly having a meeting of some sort with their laptops out. They were incredibly surprised to see me. They all froze in place and we all looked at each other for a good 15 to 30 seconds. Finally, one of the guys says, "What the hell are you doing here, mate?" I replied, "I'm just looking for the bathroom. The door guy told me it was up here." They all looked a little confused, but the guy responded, "We don't have a restroom in this building. Now please leave." I apologized and closed the door, then headed back down the staircase, confused as hell. The good news was that my urge to pee went away. I slid past the group at the table and returned to my wife, who had ordered some fish and chips, and told her all about what happened. We both agreed it was strange, but ordered another round and thought nothing of it. About 5 minutes later, I noticed the guy in the very nice looking suit come down the stairway. He saw me, then went to the security guy at the front and said something to him, then pointed at me. I almost pooped myself. The bouncer walks up to me and says, "You guys have to leave." I told him that I had not yet paid my tab, and he said not to worry about it, just go ahead and leave. I obliged. My wife and I stand outside the bar while we wait for our Uber to take us back to our hotel. The bouncer is sitting there just staring at us. It was a very awkward 5-minute wait. When our Uber gets there, the bouncer says in a very Jamaican accent, "You'll have a very good night," followed by a very loud laugh. To this day, one of the weirdest events of my life. Why were they having a business meeting at 11 p.m. in a pub on a Saturday night? Why did the bouncer tell me to go upstairs when he knew there was no bathroom? Why did they kick us out afterwards? Why did the bouncer creepily laugh at us? We have no idea what happened, but we love to tell this story and see what everyone else's theories are. I can only assume English gangsters, or maybe, I don't know, shareholders in the property meeting for whatever reason. Like, that's a thing, I think. And I mean, sorry, why not? You own a pub. Why not just meet at 11 o'clock at night, drink to your heart's content while getting some goddamn work done? I was living in San Marcos, Texas in early 2003. My boyfriend at the time and I were heading home from a party around 2 or 3 a.m. when we get stopped at a train crossing and a super long train is going by. I mean, we sat there for a solid 15 minutes watching this train go by. Some of the cars had slats or cage walls, so you could see what was in the cars when they were backlit by the streetlights. We could clearly make out a large amount of military equipment was being moved down to the coast, or maybe an airfield. Within a month or so, it was publicly announced that the US was invading Iraq. Shared the house with my parents. Got a letter from ISP for illegal downloading. It was smut. that involved multiple people. Had to tell my 70-year-old father that I knew and where he could find the free stuff online. A conversation I'm sure many of us never wish to have. Back in 2012-ish, I ran a food truck in Chicago. Chicago apparently let the Restaurant Association practically write the food truck ordinance. The ordinance stated that trucks could only be parked for a total of 2 hours at a time. We needed more time than that to make the sales we needed to be profitable. My boss had a few restaurants and the Restaurant Association wanted him as a member, so we got to sit in on a meeting and make our case about the parking time. During this meeting, they were having a discussion about how to kill the new minimum wage laws that were being discussed. It was like I was seeing the elite discuss how to keep the common people down, and it made me so incredibly angry. Doing retail PC repair, I found a massive folder of CP on a customer's laptop. Called the cops, state police, and FBI were there within 30 minutes. He ended up getting like 20 years. I was in a church in France once and it was pretty empty, very run down and had bullet holes in the walls, presumably from World War II. Anyways, on the right-hand side of the church, there was a wooden floorboard covered up by carpets. Curiosity got the better of my brother and he lifted it to find a passageway down to a tomb with skeletons and coffins without lids on them. I recently looked at the photos we took and it was truly creepy. My 65-year-old mother getting out of her wheelchair and walking around like it was nothing. She'd been wheelchair bound for 5 years at this point. I'd had my suspicions, but had talked myself out of them because that was ridiculous. Who would pretend to be wheelchair bound just for the attention? Sadly, when you are around long enough, you find that people are willing to do lots of things simply for attention. While looking for my birth certificate, I found a death certificate for a brother I never knew I had. This made me curious. I looked a little further and found family photos from my mom's previous marriage I was never told about, as well as her divorce records. She had a whole other family before ours and never told us, but I'll never bring it up to her because it's really none of my business. I opened the deep freezer and saw a severed German shepherd's head. I worked at a university animal research hospital. I knew better than to look in there. Worst fear confirmed. Also saw a window into the digestive system of a cow, and a dead horse lifted by forklift into a truck for disposal. I do kind of wish I could unsee all of that. It sounds like an unpleasant and kind of gruesome job, but it also sounds like an interesting one. Grew up with separated parents and my mother worked her butt off to provide us with a lifestyle we definitely didn't deserve. 60 plus hours every week while my siblings and I fought constantly, verbally and physically. One Christmas, we wanted a really expensive toy. Well, we went on a scavenger hunt to find it, and we did. As soon as we told her, she broke down in tears. I'll never forget the pure regret I felt in that moment. I felt like an absolute douchebag, and still do. One day, I'm going to provide for my mother with everything she deserves and more, and make sure she never has to lift a finger once she retires. Amen to that, brother. I also lived in a single household my whole life, and my mother is an absolute angel who has provided me with the best care that she can, and she deserves the world. The cream will rise to the top. Hope you enjoyed that bootleg Randy Savage. Rest in peace, Macho Man. What happened at the worst party you've ever been to? I went to a friend's graduation party after high school. I wasn't great friends with him, but I figured I would stop by with my girlfriend because he was nice enough to invite me. The party was so done up, tables full of food, streamers, confetti, all that junk, and my girlfriend and I were the only ones there. I felt awful. His parents clearly went all out to celebrate it, and it was so uncomfortable being one of 5 people there, including him and his parents. I felt awful for him. We stayed for hours out of pity and just kind of made small talk. Super depressing. We went to a friend's 40th birthday last year. She's burned some bridges lately and had an ugly divorce. My husband and I didn't want to go, but we felt like it would be good to show up. Same thing, lavishly decorated, amazing food, lots of drink. We were tastefully late and arrived to find her alone, weeping in the kitchen. There was no escape, even after she chastised us for being so late. So freaking sad. And all she wanted to talk about was that she was sure other folks would show up soon. Leaving was way more uncomfortable than staying, but by 1 a.m. it was clear no one else was coming. We were full and tipsy and walked home in a depressed silence. High school, late 80s, an outside party with a bonfire to celebrate the end of the school year. Some numbnuts throws a glass bottle of beer into the fire, and about 20 minutes later that bottle explodes and shoots a stream of boiling beer all over a girl's crotch and legs. Ambulance was called. I believe she required several skin grafts over several months. I can still remember her shrill screaming and then her passing out. I had kind of a similar thing happen, but with far less of a horrible climax to it, where some guy who crashed a camping camping party that we were doing, lots of beer and all that stuff, threw a beer can on the fire. That beer can popped due to the heat and the gas releasing all of a sudden, and it landed on a friend's tent, burning their tent down, and they had to sleep with me the night. My brother was at a party once where there were more than a couple underage drinkers present. The house they were at had a thin driveway, so all the cars were packed into a bottleneck. The night wore on, and around 1 a.m, someone decided they wanted to go home. They found the girl who owned the car at the front of the bottleneck and asked her to move her car so she could get out. She said she couldn't because she had a breathalyzer installed in her car and it wouldn't start until someone sober blew into it. They went around the party and tried to find anyone who hasn't been drinking and couldn't find one. Another guy had the brilliant idea of asking the cool 20-something dude next door to do it. So an envoy of teens heads over to the house next door and asks the dude living there if he would please blow into a breathalyzer so they could leave. The dude takes a minute to look the group over, takes a drag of his cigarette and says, "You're gonna give me $25 for every person at the party or I'm calling the cops." He certainly has the makings of a savvy businessman. My sister's birthday was in the middle of the school holidays, and for her 7th birthday, she had a party that no one turned up to. Turns out our mother put the wrong day on the invite, so a lot of people had tried to come over the day before whilst we were out. This makes me feel very grateful that a large breadth of the guests, I suppose, I invite to parties usually show up. Some girl apparently had made out with a guy who wasn't her boyfriend before leaving. Someone at the party tells him via text, and a little while later, someone is kicking down the door. He barges in, waving a gun around, screaming, "Which one of you douchebags made out with my girl?" People are ducking, scurrying away, and I'm just standing there thinking, if this is how I die, I'm going to be so mad. Host, who knew him, quickly pushed him out the door. Host just walks in and says, "Jerry, you're ruining another party? That's it. I don't care if you're armed and dangerous. Get the hell out of my house." My pal had a birthday sleepover. We were in 8th or 9th grade, I think. Street Fighter 2 had just came out for the SNES, so that was basically all we did. His parents had laid out some snacks and drinks on a party table, and there was one of these huge bags of party-sized Doritos there. We were playing Street Fighter when one of the guys grabbed a chip, bit into it, and yelled, "Oh, this chip is wet." He began investigating the bag, and we quickly discovered all the chips were wet. The birthday boy's 5-year-old brother had taken advantage of our Street Fighter distraction and licked all of the Dorito dust from every chip and placed them back in the bag. We found him playing in his room, his face covered in the implicating dust. This reminds me of a significantly less disgusting prank I wanted to pull on my brother, where I took all these soft chocolate-filled bits from a box of Cocoa Pops Rocks, if anyone remembers that cereal. Months go by. Turned out he didn't really eat cereal anymore, so I had to eat this whole bowl of, the hard bits in Cocoa Pops Rocks, and I was like, well, damn, that was a waste of time. And I also remember one time my brother tried to give me a sandwich, a jam sandwich, which as a little boy was my favorite, but I had so little trust in him, I was like, "What did you do to it?" "Nothing." And I looked in it. I just immediately examined the sandwich, opened it up, and there was just a pair of sardines in it. Went to a bachelor party at a house someone rented with a buddy. We got there late, so everyone was pretty lit by the time we got there, especially the bachelor. Now, he had hired like 4 entertainers of a certain variety for the party to walk around and dance for everybody, but at one point, the entertainers took the bachelor to the middle of the room, and they were going to do a dance just for him. Again, by this time, the dude is gone, but he managed to stumble into a chair in the middle of the room. The entertainers set up this kiddie pool in front of him, and a couple of them were going to wrestle each other, covered in baby oil. While they were oiling each other up in the middle of the room, one of the other entertainers starts to dance for the guy, and, well, she made it past like one verse of "Pour Some Sugar on Me" when homie just threw up everywhere. I mean, this was like someone turned on a fire hose of vomit. Of course, he just drenched the poor girl that was dancing for him, which made her freak out and run away towards the kiddie pool, which, may I remind you, now has 2 oiled up entertainers. And this lady, covered in vomit, slips, takes the other girls down with her, and she throws up all over them. At this point, there's 3 entertainers flailing around like fish out of water, trying desperately to get out of a kiddie pool covered in baby oil and vomit, slipping and falling over each other while the bachelor is just passed the hell out, covered in vomit, drooling on himself in a chair in the middle of the room. And just to add to this, I guess the entertainers bring a guy with them for protection or whatever, and he is losing his crap. He's trying to get the girls out of the pool, getting all sorts of nasty stuff on himself, slipping around while just repeating, "What the hell?" over and over. Good times. For some more than others, surely. White racist redneck guy took off his shirt to reveal prison prison swastika tattoos, also pulled out a gun saying he would go commit hate crimes. He began waving the gun around, getting upset. He was already super wasted. I left the room and just about left the party, but the guy who owned the house made him put his gun out in his car. Fast forward a couple hours, we were playing beer pong. Drunk racist swastika dude was playing on a team with his wife. Me and my best friend were his opponents. He was too drunk to hit anything, and his sober wife sucked. So he used distraction tactics. He took out his pecker and flopped it into the cups. His pecker was freaking huge. After a while, that stopped phasing us, so he decided to take his 20-year-old wife's clothes off. He stripped her naked while she was sober, the only girl at the party, in front of like 20 other drunk dudes. She did not look comfortable, but also, for whatever reason, didn't stop him. After a while, once that wore off, he ordered her to go to our side of the table and flirt with us while she was naked. That's when I left. Next time I saw him was after my friend's death. Drunk racist dude had given my buddy a bunch of pills, and my buddy, like an idiot, took them. Started feeling weird, drove home, and died when his heart blew up. Nobody found him for 3 days. Drunk racist dude showed up at my work, crying because he hadn't been invited to the funeral, because he had essentially killed him. He was upset that nobody seemed to care about him and that even his wife had left him. Thank Christ. I don't know why he thought I would care, but he said I was the only one he could talk to. I had only met him twice before this. It was awkward, and I told him he'd be okay. He just needed to figure some stuff out. I was pretty honest with him about all the crap that he had done, which was stupid. He agreed. I bought him a pack of cigarettes. I worked at a gas station at the time, and he rode off on his motorcycle. Never heard from him again after that. No idea what happened. I'm curious about what other company this person keeps to even be in the vicinity of this individual. Like, I'm all for having a diverse, rich group of friends from all walks of life, whether they be liberal, conservative, religious, non-religious, but at a certain point, you gotta look at someone and go like, I don't even want to be in the same vicinity as you. Somebody brought their baby. Keep in mind, we were all 17, so it was like, what the hell? My 9th birthday party, I invited the entire class as well as my only friends. They went to another school. The only person that showed up was my grandpa. Over 10 years ago, my employees got together to throw me a going-away party. It was held at a local bar that had closed to the public, just for the party, so of course I'm feeling really special. There was a kid there, around 19 years old, who was a really good guy but generally attracted trouble. I used to talk to him all the time, and any time I sensed that he was about to step and do something stupid, I used to always say, you know, the worst gift a kid can give his mother, a dead son. There's a long story behind that, but it just somehow became a thing I always said to him. Anyway, I gave a quick speech and started to duck out just as things were livening up so everybody could have their fun while I returned to my wife and our newborn. I bumped into that kid on the way out, talked to him a bit, and of course the dead son line was the last thing I said before I left. Actually, I said, you know, the worst gift, and he answered, a dead son, gave me a hug, and that was it. Pretty obvious how this story ends. Got the call a few hours later telling me he'd been killed in a car wreck. Turns out that he was trying to do good. Hadn't drank a drop, no drugs or anything. He just got into the wrong car and let a drunk idiot drive him home. There were about 4 kids in the car, and he was the only one that didn't walk away. Sad. A friend told me about this corporate party held for the clients he was at. Open bar, but pretty dull, with people being on their best behavior to schmooze and make the clients feel important. It was open bar in the sense that employees were understood to hold it together. One very, very low on the totem pole employee got hammered drunk with one of their biggest clients and proceeded to get to 3rd or 4th base in the pool for like half an hour. He was fired the following Monday. Probably worth it to him as he was making minimum wage. My wife was on her way up to the north of England to be a bridesmaid for her friend who she has known since they were young. Her friend has learning disabilities, but seems happy with her husband-to-be. On the morning of the wedding, the groom was arrested for bad-touching young children. He was apparently a known pedophile. The bride's family went ahead with the wedding reception anyway. If they actually knew, that is utterly insane to me. An old friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us used to throw house parties all the time in high school. It would usually be 15 to 30 people getting wasted and doing illegal substances. This one particular time he hosted a massive high school party because his parents weren't home, so he had probably between 80 to 90 of us teenagers at his house partying like crazy and using every illegal substance that we could get our hands on. About an hour and a half goes by, and people are messed up and having a blast. I was toasty. My buddy who hosted the party filled up capsules with illegal high, and he was swallowing those all night. So, like I said, an hour and a half goes by, and someone asks him where his parents went on vacation. His response? They're not on vacation. They went out to watch a movie. Just then is when the car rolls up, and suddenly a bunch of drunken stone punks pour out of every orifice of the house to the closest park. Every single person in that house took off. Everyone, even the guy who hosted the party. I don't know if he was worried his parents would kill him, or maybe he was so messed up he just forgot that he was at his own house. Man, I missed that guy. I was in high school and a classmate was moving, and his family had already gone to the new house. The old house was going to be torn down and was vacant, so he threw a break my stuff party. People showed up with baseball bats, all kinds of stuff, and I felt underdressed with an axe handle. Alcohol was involved. I was greeted at the door by a guy with a 6-shooter in his waistband holding a chainsaw. The event only went downhill from there. I was 16 and now, many years later, I'm a dad. It makes me cringe very hard that my offspring would never attend an event like that. Not gonna lie, that sounds pretty fun. But I'd probably be like bringing stuff or I'd be like, is this okay to break? Is this okay to break? And it's like, everything's okay to break. I'd be self-conscious about it. I went to the beach for a friend's birthday party. After the sun went down, we drove back to her house, about 30 minutes away, to continue the party. When we got home, her dog was dead. Because she lived in a rural area, the other guys and I had to dig a hole and bury it so the coyotes wouldn't consume the carcass. Burying a dead dog is the weirdest thing I've ever done at a birthday party. Good Lord, I can only imagine just how devastated that girl would have been. I'd be heartbroken if I came home for a party and my dog was dead. That'd just be party's cancelled. Maybe sit around and feel bad and play Mario Kart for a bit, but I'd probably be losing with all the tears in my eyes. Halloween 2007. Random friend of devil's lettuce dealer having a party at the house across the street from the religious college APU. Those kids party hard. Best buddy and I made Roman armor with sheet metal by hand. We were definitely proud and looked kinda cool, I must say. Anyway, we show up to this party and there are maybe 20 people. The house is really small. Dude whose place it is like extremely stoked on our costumes. Makes us feel really welcome, which is nice at a stranger's party. He asks us if we can guard the keg and says we can drink all we want from it. We agree, of course. He has the keg in the laundry room, which is small. We chill and drink lots and meet lots of cool people getting beers. Hour rolls by and we realize that the party has gotten huge. 2 new kegs delivered, well over 150 people. The house is so full, it's scary. We are still at the keg and the bathroom is far away. My buddy is wasted and decides to pee into the washer. No regrets on his part. I try to make my way through the crowd, which is utterly impossible. My hand-cut sheet metal armor is poking and slicing people the more I push. Bad idea. People start screaming and laughing. Suddenly, some girl had to poop so bad that she just popped down in the crowd and let loose. The cops are also breaking up the party. House smells horrible. Friend and I are the last ones out. Poop smeared all over the floor, trampled and painted everywhere. Cops are dying laughing at the situation. I puke outside soon as we exit, like gallons of beer puke. Cops compliment my costume while crying, laughing. That was the highlight of the night, and that chick must not have pooped for days. This entire topic is reminding me of why I simultaneously miss and don't miss wild parties. I was at a trashy shotgun wedding reception and slipped off to take a whiz in the bushes. When I came back, there were 2 blonde strippers dressed as cops arresting the groom. I said, "Who the hell rents strippers for a wedding?" Really loud right as the music cut out. They were not strippers. Went to an isolated cottage in the woods up north that my friend's rich family owned. There was about 15 of us. Everyone except for me imbibed in some illegal substances. I don't do that stuff, really, but have no problem with them if they want to. I was getting drunk and had enough fun with that. Everything was going great until one guy started to have a really bad trip. Me and the guy who owned the cottage were the ones taking care of him because I was the most sober and he felt responsible for his parents' cabin. It turned really scary really fast. I pretty much carried him up the stairs into a room before someone else noticed and got a friend to come help me. We'd turn on the light and he'd start screaming that it was too bright. We'd turn off the light. He'd scream that it was too dark. He kept complaining that he had to use the bathroom, but wouldn't get up when we urged him to. My friend told me to fetch a different friend who said that he was not in the state of mind to deal with it and refused. Another friend told me that she knows him better than anyone else, so she should go talk to him. I tried to stop her, but she dashed past me and ran upstairs into the room and came out crying because he'd punched her in the face and then wet himself and peed all over her. We didn't know what to do. We just kind of left him in the room and went downstairs while all that was heard from upstairs was screaming and banging. We sat around in a circle and debated whether or not we should call an ambulance. Everyone ultimately decided against it because they didn't want to be fined for having illegal substances. The noises eventually stopped and we all went to bed. The next day, we found out that our friend had felt like he was trapped in his own skin and was trying to claw, bite, and rip it off. He was covered in bite marks and scratches. Everyone treated him like a monster and avoided him the next day, which made me really angry because it could have just as easily happened to any of them. That sounds like one major bummer of a night, and I sympathize in the disappointment with the other friends. Like, damn, to treat him so callously after, having a bad trip and whatnot. Hopefully that didn't just, put a wedge between that guy and the rest of the friendship group, because, God, that'd be sad. College party. Pre-drank with my buddies and their roommate Ryan. Ryan gets drunk, high, super confidence, and starts teaching us how to not take any guff from no one. We're walking to the party, and with zero context, he's preaching shoulders back, stand up straight, get right up in the guy's face. No idea why he feels the need to be such a tough guy. Within 5 minutes of being at the party, another guy puts Ryan in a headlock and blasts him in the face a quick 5 or so times. Blood everywhere, hosts freaking out. It turns out they were arguing about how good a mutual friend was at water skiing. Am I the only one confused about how that would lead to such violence? The only thing I can say that's resulted of this is that now I am more interested in how good this person is at water skiing and whose opinion was whose. Kid hosting the party didn't plan on dad coming home. Dad showed up, freaked out, cuts off his kid's finger with a decorative sword. Party ended. Kid went to the hospital to have his fingers reattached and showed back up at the house we moved the party to with a giant cast on. No, the dad didn't get in trouble. The kid was probably 19 or 20 and must have not told the hospital what had happened. Also, he cut them off closer to the tip, not the entire finger. I'm guessing they just sewed them back on. I don't think it required actual surgery. It happened relatively early in the evening, and he didn't show back up at the next house until hours later. It was probably close to sunrise. It wasn't really a party at the next house. It was more like half the people from the sword house sitting around drinking and talking about how messed up the night was. That would certainly be a night to remember for just about everyone involved, I must say. It's hilarious, but also tragic. I'm mixed on this. It was the first party I ever went to, and the worst party I ever went to. It was all going great until this dude, drunk, caught his girlfriend making out with his friend and threw a freaking TV at him. Then he just went absolutely ape crazy and started screaming at him in the GF. I, like the others, stood in shock and slowly proceeded to finish my Pepsi and then get the hell out. After I left, my friend said, "Waste of a perfectly good TV." I was pledging to a fraternity and we had a crazy party. Towards the end, there were passed out people all over and a few brothers and myself who were still awake at 3 a.m. trying to kick strangers out. The last group was this passed out girl and her friends sitting on our couch on the first floor, and after much prodding and poking, the passed out chick begins to stir and moan, then proceeds to drunkenly sit up and mumble, "I need to pee." She stands up all wobbly, then suddenly takes off her pants. Her friend has a shocked face, knowing what's about to happen. Brother Joe has a huge grin on his face, and I'm like, what the hell? The drunk chick squats and begins to pee all over our tiles. It was hilarious, and when she's done, her embarrassed friend grabs her and quickly leaves. We're all laughing our butts off when suddenly Joe abruptly stops laughing and yells to me, "Pledge, grab 'em up and clean this up." What's something you found out about your significant other years into the relationship that made you reevaluate the whole thing? 9 months into the relationship, I found out he had a court date. He told me it was for assaulting a bouncer. Very soon after, his mother admitted that he had a court date for assaulting his underage relative. When I confronted him about this, he said that the underage girl raped him. When I told him he was full of crap, he went on to admit that she did something for him that I will not say. Soon after, I went into his lawyer's office with him and read the transcript. It turns out he had raped his underage niece twice and just tells a different lie to anyone who asks him why he's in jail. Total piece of crap. I ran very fast, haven't seen him since, and I hope I will never see him again. About 1 year in, he told me he was about to get full custody of his son. I didn't know he had a son. About a year in, I found out she lied to me about getting an STD test. Turned out she had more than one STD, which somehow I tested clean for. There is actually a reason for that. Some STDs have an easier time transmitting from men to women than from women to men. When I had my first child, the pregnancy wasn't a surprise or an accident. We talked and planned. He got a little overbearing during the pregnancy, like insisting on breastfeeding without even discussing it with me. I put it down to new dad nerves and not knowing any better. Turns out that was only the tip of the iceberg. He believed that children were completely and totally a wife's responsibility. He wouldn't change a diaper. He wouldn't pick up the baby when it cried. No way would he get up in the middle of the night. He expected me to work a full-time job plus do all of the childcare. At that point, I was confused and appalled, but I told myself he just needed time to adjust. I realized how delusional I was when the baby got sick while he was on a fishing trip. The doctors thought the baby had meningitis, so not just sick, but life-threatening sick. I called and asked him to come home. He refused. He'd paid for 2 more days of fishing, and he didn't want to lose the money. She would lie about tiny, inconsequential things, made me question my own perception of truth and self-instinct. Eventually caught her in a lie, and she denied even when presented with full proof. It wasn't something huge, but it was something that opened my eyes a little. My friend swears I was being gaslit. Out of nowhere, a year into being married, he said he wants to join the Marine Corps. He also wanted me to drop out of law school, birth babies, take care of his mother, and run a household, all while he's deployed. Hard pass. Found his hidden folder on his phone, blackmailed girls for nudes, stole nudes from girls, pretended to be someone else and sexted his sister without her knowing it was him. Constantly made me feel like I was crazy or overreacting. Also realized what him calling me a manic pixie dream girl meant. I'm hardly a perfect specimen of a human being. I would like to believe that I have a respectable amount of moral fiber, but boy, do y'all know how to pick 'em. 7 years in, after having been married a year, my husband finally confessed to me that he was raped as a child for 6 years by his older brother. It really threw the struggles of our SX life into perspective. Now knowing this, I have done all kinds of research, found how to support rape victims, info, and I've changed how I behave when we're intimate. We're working on it. I tell him every time we're intimate that it's an act of love and he's safe with me, and we have our safe word for general use if he's feeling overwhelmed. We're really making progress. I think things are better now. He's starting to understand that it's love in our marriage, and I want him to want me, and I want him to be a little controlling when he feels up to it. He's grown a lot, he's a very strong person, and I'm immeasurably lucky to have him. That is a lot of trauma and baggage to take on, but with the right person and a whole lot of love, I think you'll get through it. I realized he would always blame me for his angry outbursts and mistakes. He punched a wall and screamed about a homework assignment he didn't understand because I was sitting on the couch quietly. Then after he was finished blaming me and realized I was upset, he became all sad and wanted me to comfort him. What a pathetic human being. I'm glad I've grown past accepting that sort of behavior. That my husband wanted to start fires and kill police officers and was planning on framing me for it so his girlfriend could move in while I did his time in prison for him. We were driving home from a dinner in which we drove separately to, and without knowing it, she cut me off by merging into my lane last minute without using a blinker. I was annoyed at first, but when I recognized it was her car, it made me feel very strange. I think that makes sense. Knowing that your significant other might be really reckless on the road is worrying, concerning, very concerning, especially if you plan to have kids. That she cheated on me and that she lied about being psychologically abused by her father. She lied about being financially responsible and was formulating a plan to murder me. Today, my girlfriend told me that every time we argue, she wants to stab me. Now, she might not mean it, but that is certainly a red flag. That she had been in contact with her exes, met them, and regularly cheated on me with just whomever. 8 years, she was really good at hiding her tracks. I only found out because I contracted an STD, curable fortunately, from her. I was really glad we didn't have kids and divorced her, moved away and drank too much. Then I met the most awesome person in the world, who I married, had kids, and didn't know relationships could be this good. Turned out my husband, who was sober from illegal substances and alcohol, had been using booger sugar monthly for the last 15 years, just enough to maintain apparently. We have worked it out, but I was almost gone at that point. He hid a few addictions and withdrawals from me. I forgave him. He stole $4,000 from our joint savings that only I contributed to. I forgave him. He sexted and was trying to meet up with randos, which made me realize I should probably leave. But the thing that made me certain was when I realized he didn't actually want an equal relationship. He expected me to shop, cook, clean, and be responsible for him for the rest of our lives. He pretended to want what I wanted for years, and I was dumb enough to believe his excuses on why he just couldn't do it yet. I demand and I deserve a reasonable equal relationship. Divorce was one of the best things I ever did. That she wants to have fights and be mad. For example, we currently haven't spoken for 3 days and she's sleeping in the other room because I accidentally texted "good night, sleep tight" instead of just "good night" because I was the one going to bed, not her. So in her mind, that text must have been meant for another woman. We live together, we work together, we share a car. How on God's green earth could I have a side chick? She told me when we first met that she was broken as she suffers from depression. I didn't brush it off, so to speak, but just kind of thought, yeah, whatever, it won't be that bad. It's not because I don't think depression isn't serious, but I just had never even really been in contact with someone with depression, so I kind of had no idea what it entails. Hopefully that makes sense. 5.5 years of being together later, and holy cow, damn, depression is just super serious. I've been in situations and scenarios I never imagined being in because of her and her depression. She's phoned me up twice while she was working in London. I live 60 miles away in Kent, saying she loves me and she's sorry and she's going to end it. What the hell do? I didn't know what to frickin' do. Thankfully, both of those times she never went ahead with it, but still ended up in a hospital, and obviously I went up to her. Sometimes she's just crying and crying and crying and crying. Countless visits to the GP for talks and medication. Again, things I've never dealt with before, and at first I was extremely uncomfortable about it all. This isn't for me kind of stuff. But the good news is it and she are part of my life now. I don't mind all of the above anymore. She loves me and I love her. What's even more amazing is that I'm the one that keeps her going, she says. This is life, and I'm now fully aware of the seriousness of depression. She recently got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Made me look back and realize a lot of her actions and anger stemmed from that. She just started mood stabilizers and has found a great therapist to help her work through everything. But it would have almost been a deal breaker if she didn't try to actively manage it. She lied to me, or rather flat out denied telling me that she has herpes. Guess who has herpes now? Her reasoning? I thought you wouldn't talk to me if you found out I had it. I would have kept talking to her, but perhaps I would have wrapped it up first before, doing the deed so soon. Just frickin' disclose that information at the start. Don't be a butt who gives someone an STD knowingly. Yeah, that is definitely just completely and utterly unacceptable. 7 years in, I found out he was a high school dropout without even a GED. He had initially told me he was a game design major, turned down a job opportunity or internship, I can't recall which, with EA Toronto because he didn't want to leave me. I literally told him, go, we can figure other crap out later. This won't wait. I should have known then. Ugh, love is blind, but only for so long. Turns out when she said she wanted to get married, she actually meant that she just wanted to get married, by which I mean wanting to get married is not the same thing as wanting to marry me. I just happened to be the guy that she was with at the time when her friends were getting married, and it was making her jealous, and her mother was also putting pressure on her to get married. It happens to a lot more people than you think. After several years together, my ex told me nonchalantly one evening that he stole $500 from one of his best friends because he really needed it. This ex was a college-educated person trying to get into dental, medical, or pharmacy school. Not only was there no reason for this person to steal their friend's money, I didn't understand how someone could do that and feel no remorse whatsoever, especially to someone they considered a good friend. It was at that moment that I seriously began to believe I had given my trust and love to a total sociopath. It was the catalyst that pushed me out of the relationship. I found out later that while I was working on a degree in another city, he found dates on Tinder, spinning lies about being being in med school and owning a luxury condo overlooking the Wisconsin state capitol. He'd take girls for rides on my motorcycle and bring them back to the condo I owned. I don't know who or how many, but a neighbor specifically went out of their way to tell me what was going on. One of his Tinder dates was with a good friend's best friend, and I heard through her the lies about being rich and working in medicine. A high school classmate of his texted me to warn me the same thing. He hit on a girl at a reunion by saying he was in med school at Wisconsin, but the girl was actually in med school at Wisconsin, and she promptly told everyone about the exchange. When I went to kick him out of the condo, he told me that his mother had turned into a raging alcoholic and that kicking him out would mean he couldn't take care of her anymore. He stole a whole bunch of stuff from me, some of which he still has, and after all of it, he had the gall to text and ask if he could manage my finances for me at his new job in, believe it or not, wealth management. I guarantee you he's stealing from every one of his clients. But when he said he stole from his friend, it really changed my opinion that he wasn't just an insecure millennial trying to find his way between college and the real world. He's a Class A raging narcissist, and holy crap, am I glad he's out of my life forever. A little over a year after being officially together, I finally put together that they had the cancer gene in their family. Despite being crazy in love with her, this made me want to back out because I totally saw a future with her. Her grandpa and dad both had head and neck cancers, 2 aunts and 1 uncle were survivors of ovarian and lung cancer. I knew I wanted kids, and she did too, so there was always this looming fear that our future kids might get it. Still went through because she mattered more to me than all my fears combined. Life plays a cruel joke, and despite having no vices and being an occasional drinker, she got the big C as well. Head and neck, just like Grandpa and her dad. Lost her a little over a year ago. Still no regrets. Still love her a lot. Damn. My wife and I married quickly without getting to know each other much. She was raised in a Mormon home, and I had converted to Mormonism at 18. We played the roles of provider and nurturer in our marriage according to the teachings of the faith. I left the faith about 6 years ago. She stopped attending about 2 to 3 years ago. The very difficult conversation when I left made us talk about things more than we ever had before. We dove deeply into so many aspects of our life, marriage, and desires for the future. I realized after years of marriage that she was actually an incredibly smart, dynamic woman. I loved her a lot before this. I always thought she was amazing, but because of the dynamics of each of our upbringings and the dynamic of the faith, I never realized how intelligent she was. I ask her opinions on things all the time now. We left our faith, ditched most of our baggage from our sexist upbringings, and I realized how great of a lifelong companion I have, and I am ecstatic about this. That he had been cheating on me and racking up debt. We had gotten married and made life plans that he had always known would never come to fruition because of what he was doing behind closed doors. Yet he allowed me to marry him anyway, knowing I was signing up for a life I did not want, and that we did not agree on. I would have been the one to bear the brunt of the consequences for his actions. Well, I'm glad you got out of there. He told me from the very get-go that he was diagnosed with Asperger's in grade school, but I just brushed it off because I know many people who half-heartedly claim to be autistic. But a couple weeks ago, I was lying in bed while he was putting away one of his 50 pocket watches in his holding box that he keeps in pristine condition tucked away in his sock drawer. Then he proceeded to pick out a new axe to carry in his backpack full of supplies, and for some reason, it just hit me for the first true time that he is totally, 100% on the spectrum. And it made me think back to the times when he has done things that absolutely infuriate me, and he has no idea he had done something wrong, and suddenly I could see that he wasn't being manipulative or underhanded. His brain simply works in a different way than mine, and he even tried to warn me of this. I just for some reason chose to disregard the information. He is super willing to meet me halfway, even when he doesn't understand why something bothers me. He acknowledges how I feel, and he stops doing it. He is the goofiest, most eccentric ball of love I have ever met, and coming to terms with his autism has made me love him all that much more.
Men, I don't know who needs to hear this, but there's still hope!
He was always very secretive and a little paranoid. One example, I learned about 15 years into the relationship that his birthday is not in May like he said, but in November. When he moved to the US from England in the 1970s, they had written it down incorrectly in his passport, and he never changed it to his correct birth date. I still don't know why. Every flat and clean surface can and will become a closet space. It was my girlfriend of 2 years last night in town before leaving for college. She told me she was hanging out with her friends, which I was fine time with, as we had planned to see each other every weekend. Turns out she didn't see her friends. She hung out with her ex-boyfriend and then left for school the next day and didn't answer her phone for a week. First time I talked to her after she left, she told me what she did and broke up with me. See, this kind of thing is why people have trust issues. That and much, much, much worse things. Things that have already been covered in this video even. There's a ton of things I discovered over the years we were together, but the biggest one was how he had lied about his exes. He talked terribly about them and would make them all sound like cheaters and liars or just plain psychopathic. It turns out that's not the truth at all. They were none of those things, and I found out the hard way that it was him that embodied those qualities all along. We have broken up and gotten back together many times over the past 6 years, but it ended for the last time this weekend. Good for you. She is perfectly okay flipping out on the kids. I mean, full on cussing them out and yelling about stuff. I ultimately confronted her about it, and she said, "So everyone else is allowed to express themselves when they're upset, but not me?" We had to have a long talk after that one, as would be expected. Her walls were just too high to ever get through. Intimacy, affection, emotion, romance, all gone, and she was unwilling to change. As can be the case with some to many people for a myriad of reasons, and it can be quite sad. I was just out of high school and was dating a girl. We were fairly serious but young. We went to Subway for lunch, and she was super rude to the poor girl working behind the counter, and after we left, she was saying how stupid she was. Couldn't even make the sandwich right. I started to notice she was rude to lots of service and retail workers. I saw her in a much different light after that. We didn't last very long. I think there's a saying where it goes something like, if someone's nice to you but not to the waiter, then they're probably not really a nice person. We are Texans. He likes beans in his chili, but I've decided I can make it work. 3 years into a 5-year relationship, my now ex-girlfriend finally told me she had a bad eating disorder after I overheard her throwing up after a meal. It was something I suspected in the past and questioned her on, but she was adamant with her denials. This was not the end. In fact, it was really just planting a seed of doubt. 2 years from this point, we were still together, and I was still trying to support her through treatment of her disorder. Eventually, more of her secrets started come out: secretive alcoholism, childhood abuse, cheating. Even with all the secrets and lies, it was not easy to cut ties, but it was needed in order to keep my own sanity. My wife and I have very little boundaries. Oftentimes, while we're having a conversation in our room, one of us needs to use the bathroom. We'll just follow each other in the bathroom and continue talking. If the conversation is good enough, poop won't hinder our dialogue. However, there are times when my wife is in the bathroom and locks the door. I always thought it was weird, but it didn't bother me. We've been married for 9 years now. We met at 15 and are now 28. We've grown up together, graduated together, traveled together. We know each other so well and have nothing to hide from one another. Or so I thought. This all changed one day. I was feeding our kids lunch and she was in the bathroom. Unbeknownst to her, she did not lock the door. When I walked in on her, I witnessed something that I never thought I would see. Something that lived in the back of my head, but I didn't think it could be real. My wife of 13 years relationship, 9 years of marriage, 3 kids together, was shaving her upper lip. She is Puerto Rican and has a little peach fuzz that you can't even really notice, and she was shaving it like it was a full-on mustache. She looked at me with this embarrassed look, and I thought to myself, what else is she hiding? I don't know that I'll ever look at her the same again. That one was really cute. I like the tongue-in-cheek nature of it. She would ignore my opinion about anything. It started small, like forcing me to watch movies I didn't like with her. After that, she made dinner with food I disliked, then go to theme parks even though I told her I didn't want to go in a roller coaster. Over the years, it escalated to her saying we wanted at least 3 children. I've never wanted kids, and she knew that. I started to notice I didn't want to spend time with her anymore. It was exhausting. So, bye. We were together for 4 years before she told me she was obsessed with Star Wars. Like, what the hell? That's day one stuff. We could have been going to midnight shows and dressing up. Oh, the squandered time. One of you could have been Chewbacca and the other could be Han Solo. I didn't have much to do with my significant other, now ex's parents, for the first few years. This changed after we were married, and I discovered that she was basically a psychological carbon copy of her father, and I, her mother. Only problem with that was her father was a domineering man who wore his wife down over many years to the point that she was basically mute and offered no resistance to him. What he wanted, he got. My ex was already showing a tendency to bully me into supplication, and I realized I was heading down the same path as her mother. I had already started giving up trying to argue about anything with her. I saw my future quite clearly one day and left.
To come to that realization, like, the back and forth and look in the mirror, that must be terrifying. Well, one day I was having a really crappy day at work. Headache, annoyed at my coworkers, etc., and was moaning about it to him. Then he shows up unannounced with Advil and my favorite coconut water, which was really freaking sweet and made my day good again. But then, when I get home, this dude had a new PS4 controller waiting for me, with takeout from my favorite Mexican restaurant. So yeah, reevaluated a whole bunch, and now I'm saving up for a ring. What are some psychological experiments with interesting results? White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white rats and black rats are raised together and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically, rats are racist unless raised to accept differences. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology, and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically, they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead, they told the teachers that a few students picked at random were very brilliant and scored very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study, the kids took the test again, and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scored higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy, they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of applications in the real world and especially education. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, the experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. In this experiment, they took groups of orphan children and separated them into 3 groups. One was the control, the second were told they had a lisp and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, Group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They spoke better, they were more willing to improve, they were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. All things in moderation, as they say. I think any excessive amount of abuse or even nurturing and confirmation or whatever can be bad for anyone growing up. Because on one hand, you get people who grow up into quivering leaves of human beings, and that's unfortunate, but you can grow out of that. And then you have people who just become egotistical or maybe struggle to accept objective facts and maybe don't like it when people disagree with their more subjective opinions. The Monopoly Study by Paul Piff. He basically brought 2 strangers into the lab together and had them play a game of Monopoly together. He randomly assigned one participant to start the game with twice as much money than the other, and that participant also got to roll both dice to get around the board, i.e., the other participant started with half the money and could only roll 1 dice. At the end of the game, when he asked the participant who started with more money why he won the game, they would chalk it up to their excellent strategy and gamesmanship, rather than the fact that they had started the game with way more resources. It says a lot about how we deal with being born into a privileged state. I am skeptical as to whether or not you can actually equate real life and a game of Monopoly together, and whether or not people would be that blind to their advantages. Not entirely sure if it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan experiment, 13 people feigned mental illness to get into mental hospitals, and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released, they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital, and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan, in fact, hadn't sent anyone. The 3 Christs of Ypsilanti. A psychologist forces 3 people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist in question, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where 2 men who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured 3 Christs. What would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy, that they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures, some unethical stuff, but interesting.
a huge fan of Milgram's small world experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it's really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it onto the same group of people on the 5th degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. That is kind of nice to think about. If you stare into a dimly lit mirror for 10 plus minutes, you start to see hallucinations. What individuals see tends to vary, but they've used this as a test to simulate schizophrenia before because some see monsters, deformities, or general weird stuff. I did a variation of it for a friend in uni and completely wimped out of it after my face started not looking like my face anymore. I had a complete disassociation. I stopped looking and just waited out the time. I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We're not born with it, but if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other half glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood end and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who is standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, babies crawl over there without giving a crap. At some point, though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass, maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty frickin' cool. It is definitely interesting to watch something that has low intelligence or self-awareness slowly gain more of it over time. You know, it's the process of how having a kid and everything is interesting. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve a memory from your long-term memory, it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular trauma. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a Taekwondo match and awarded more points to the red competitor versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red competitor. Red may be a signal of dominance, as reddened skin is associated with higher testosterone or possibly higher fertility in women. Wearing red may induce intrinsic psychological effects which increase dominance in addition to altering the perception of others. Researchers found that putting red leg bands on birds increased dominant behavior as they took the lion's share of the food. For my psychology degree dissertation, I presented photos of men to be rated on a scale of friendly 0 to threatening 10. Men received a higher threat score if I photoshopped their t-shirt to be red. Mice were put on 2 sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually, when the right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted, opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. That's nice to know, but now I want an experiment where there are stakes, risks. I want there to be a moral dilemma in this situation for the mouse. What do you do, Mr. Mouse? Save the stranger with the cure for the entire mouse colony, or save your family? I just recently heard of blind-sightedness during one of my cognitive psychology classes. Basically, the area of the brain that processes what our eyes see is located at the back of the head, just where your skull starts to get smaller, towards your neck. Because of this, if you hit your head back there quite often, everything will go black for a moment before sight returns again. Sometimes, though, following severe trauma to this area of the brain, like after falling off a ladder onto a curb or something, a person is never able to see again. For a long time, it was assumed that the eyes were somehow incapable of seeing following the trauma, and that was why people were blind. However, it's been shown that it is just the processing of the images that is damaged. In other words, your eyes are still working away, viewing images, but your brain is unable to process the images, so you can't see them. Some experiments looking into this have found that people with damage to this area can still navigate around things in front of them without realizing they are doing it. So if you told someone with this damage to walk down a corridor, door and you placed obstacles in their way, they wouldn't be able to see the obstacles, but they could have avoid bumping into them because their eyes are still able to view them and send signals to other areas of the brain to avoid knocking things. This is known as blind-sightedness. Blew my mind a little. And with that, you have ruined Daredevil forever. He's not really blind, he's just got blind-sightedness. To like the nth degree, I suppose. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with 2 other people, and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals. I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they chose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer as to not be judged by others or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even question their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time, some of the actors say the wrong answer while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support. Here's a twofer for you. So way back in the day, researchers examined the brains of cab drivers in London versus regular people via brain scanning, MRI I believe, but I can't recall. They found that the cab drivers had cognitive advantages over regular people and also had a larger hippocampus, the area of the brain primarily involved in memory storage and recall. And just the other year, researchers investigated the effects of video games on cognitive decline. They had older people either play Mario 64 or Mario Galaxy, took virtual piano lessons, or they did nothing. This lasted 6 months. The researchers measured brain size before and after the experiment began. They also gave the participants a test on their short-term memory and cognitive functioning before and after the experiment as well. Mario group increased gray matter in the hippocampus and cerebellum, improved short-term memory and cognitive functioning. Piano group increased gray matter in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and cerebellum, no change in cognitive functioning. Control had no significant change. The authors believe that it was because the participants had to learn and navigate through a virtual world in order to beat the game that they wound up developing their short-term memory. The results were similar to those found in cab driver research. Mario doesn't provide players with an in-game map the way Call of Duty does, so they have to develop an internal cognitive map of the virtual world in order to get around it. Now, it's important to remember that the changes in cognitive functioning were very small to the extent that I would argue that they aren't actually meaningful, that the sample size in this experiment were very small, which would have skewed the results, and that it was very recent and still needs to be replicated. But the results to me are fascinating in that they suggest that certain video games may provide certain benefits to older people. I'd really like to see what happens if they had participants play the game for longer than 6 months, since realistically, gamers won't just play games for a 6-month period, they play for years. Man, Mario Galaxy is the bomb. I love that game so much. This is something I've been thinking about lately, actually. I hate the fact that some games nowadays don't have mini-maps. I mean, I used to be great with directions in video games, but I think over time I have gotten worse because of the constant use of mini-maps within video games. The Selective Laziness of Reasoning is an article I found and then partially replicated in my research methods class during my undergraduate. It's so great with a very interesting method and results that make you think about discussion and arguments a lot. Basically, the researchers presented participants with different syllogism, logic puzzles like all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, so Socrates is mortal, etc. And they asked them to provide their answers and also their reasoning for the answers. Later on, participants were asked to return and they presented presented some of their old answers, but the answers were reversed to be exactly what they had written down previously. But if their own argument from prior was presented as someone else's, they would disagree with it. Essentially, the lesson was we critically evaluate other people's arguments with much more focused lenses, and we afford ourselves less loopholes to jump through to validate and substantiate our own claims. Diet and behavior in children. Sugar and sweets don't make kids hyper. I love this one because it's so counterintuitive and every parent loves to tell you how their kid definitely does. Researchers took a bunch of parents and their kids and split them into two groups, those who get healthy fruit and those who get sugary sweets. The kids were separated from their parents for a moment and given the fruit or the sweets. A few minutes later, the parents were brought back in and either told the truth about what they'd been given or lied and told the opposite. The parents and kids were left by themselves with an assortment of toys, and the parents were asked to rate their kids' behavior. What they found is that irrespective of what they were actually given to eat, parents who were told their kids had sugary sweets reported worse behavior than those who were told they had fruit. Again, irrespective of what they actually had. The interesting thing is that when you actually looked at the kids' behavior, they really were misbehaving, generally being more inclined to screech, throw toys around, or ignore instructions. Turns out it's actually the parents' behavior that determines how the kids act. The same study has also been done with sugary drinks versus water, same result. Another interesting experiment is the Loftus experiment of fake memories and the power of suggestion. It's basically about implanting memories of events that have never taken place, or alter the subject's detailed memory of that event. You can quite easily test this in real life. Find a busy picture of a village, preferably cartoon and vividly colored, allow a test subject to inspect the picture for 20 to 30 seconds, and let them know that you'll be asking questions. Turn the picture face down and ask 2 to 3 questions about the contents of the picture, preferably easy to answer questions. Was there an X in the picture, or did Y happen? Also mix in a fake question there. For instance, the picture may have had a skyline but no sun. If you ask the subject whether the sun was yellow or orange, chances are that they will create a memory of a sun being visible in the picture and tell you a color. The Loftus experiment has been used to disqualify young children from giving testimonials in judicial proceedings, and follow-up experiments have included implanting memories of fake balloon rides and parents losing the subject in a mall as a toddler. It's quite fascinating. The last 2 stories have done nothing but inform me of one thing and one thing alone: children cannot be trusted. The elevator groupthink study, very amusing and sad at the same time. The experiment involved several actors entering an elevator with an oblivious participant. They then begin to perform a series of odd behaviors, such as they all stood facing the rear of the elevator. Inevitably, everyone else who got on ended up also facing the rear so as to not stand out from the rest. The study demonstrates how easily people succumb to group pressure to behave in a certain way. I don't think these ones are that good in that these events are happening in a vacuum in a very specific place. So if I saw everyone looking the back end of an elevator, for example, I would assume that maybe it's one of those elevators with 2 doors and that everyone else has used it before, especially if it's an elevator that I've never used before. If it's one that I had used before, I'd probably be stood there being like, what the hell is everyone doing? Research into where morality comes from. They asked people taboo questions like, a brother and a sister are alone in a cabin in the woods one night. They are both over 18 and decide to make love once, as they think it will strengthen their relationship. The sister is on birth control and the brother wears a condom just to be safe. Is this act wrong? Or another question was, a woman is cleaning her house and has no rags, so she finds an old American flag, tears it up, and uses it to clean her house. Is this act wrong? They created stories like this to give an initial reaction of disgust. They would then ask the participant to explain their answers. Most people couldn't give a good answer, only saying it feels wrong. They then went further and the interviewer would try their best to change the participant's mind, saying things like, well, no one saw, no one got hurt, etc., but participants wouldn't change their original response. The conclusion was that people make intuitive, emotional, split-second decisions all the time, and the reasoning, logical portion of the brain tries its best to explain the decision, but cannot change the initial decision. See The Rightful Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Subjects were tested for introvert versus extrovert personality types. Prediction was that when placed in a sensory deprivation chamber, the introverts would be able to handle it easily while the extroverts would not. Exactly the reverse was found. Introverts became agitated quickly and performed all manner of self-stimulation. Extroverts quickly went to sleep. What the findings showed was that it's introverts who are the sensation seekers, needing stimulation from the outside world. Extroverts create their own internal sensation and project that out to the world. Oh man. I'm such an introvert. Base rats. You probably know that if you drop a cat upside down that they'll right themselves and land on their feet. Rats have this reflex too. Even baby rats have this reflex. However, slower, which is tested by dropping them upside down in a tank of water. The baby rats will flip themselves upright as they float down through the water before they are scooped out and dried off. It was assumed that all reflexes are innately coded for in their genes. A group of researchers from the developmental psychobiology field didn't believe in this idea of innate reflexes. They believed that reflexes are learned through non-obvious experience. The researchers took a newly pregnant rat and sent her into space. The rat gestated the babies in space and was brought back to Earth just before giving birth. The baby rats were born on Earth in the lab. When the baby space rats were tested for the righting reflex, they didn't show it. They just floated through the water like they didn't know which way was down, because the baby rats didn't have experience with gravity in utero. They didn't learn about gravity and didn't develop the innate reflex. Therefore, other reflexes may be just as experience-driven as this one. Teachers, what do you know about your students that they think you don't know? I have never understood how students think if they lower their volume by 2 notches we suddenly become deaf. It's an enclosed space with 15 to 30 other people. If I don't hear it once, it will probably get repeated and I'll hear it again. I think the issue is students think we have so much on our plate with a lesson that we're in a whole other world. But really, this could be the 3rd or 4th time I've done this lesson this week, or even the 20th time in my career. When everything is basic rehearsal, you can zone out into other conversations pretty easily. I know who the loose girls are, the illegal substance dealers, the gang members, and when the fights are going to occur. I know each administrator has about 5 fake social media accounts and keeps tabs on what everyone is saying, and by Monday I will know what shenanigans you got up to over the weekend. I also know how to get out of going to the rally, which narc will look the other way and let you ditch class, and where people do the illegal substances on campus. I know that during lunch some have SX in the bathroom next door to my classroom, but they use protection. I've seen them use condoms on the floor, and by the end of the first month of school, I know when you're lying and I know when you've had a crappy night at home. I know who has crappy parents and who has no parents. I know of one of my students who sometimes sleeps on the park bench and a few who are abused. I know several who take care of their siblings. I know of learning disorders and mental disorders. I know how much you have the capacity to handle and know that math is not the most important thing in the world. My 8th graders call me Miss B because for some reason they can never remember or pronounce my full name. One of my classes has started calling me Miss Booty. When I hear them using it with each other, I pretend that I heard my name and ask if they need any assistance in the most chipper and obnoxious teacher voice possible. It's nice to see them jump when I respond. It's also nice to take a break from overhearing disgusting, prepubescent, school bathroom, counter, nasty business, bus ride, BJ horror stories by dropping in on the Pokemon conversations that spring up every now and then from the quiet kids that are probably even bigger weirdos. As the daughter of a teacher, you just learn things about students you never repeat, and you learn things about other teachers. My mom teaches special education, and she is bound to secrecy about everything, and she doesn't let up on it. But I hear other teachers talk about students like they're garbage. They talk about the parents, they even talk about each other. Teachers are the worst gossips. You want to hear some crap? Just stay after school. I teach at a public university. For something like 8 years, I've been sitting in on the first day of class every semester, quietly dressed like a student. Every now and then 1 or 2 of them catch on, but most of them are clueless. They start talking about how they haven't done the homework for the first day, or how they've looked me up on Rate My Professor, or why I'm such a tool and late on the first day. I hear about being high or drunk or hungover that morning. I usually wait about 10 minutes when they're thinking of leaving before I stand up and start class. Maybe it's because I'm English, but I've discovered how hard it is for me to say a word like start and then follow it up with class, start class. But rather I go start class because obviously they sound more similar. I only bring this up because I'm sure people have maybe noticed that sometimes I deviate between something like grass and grass, bath or bath, and start and class. God, I'm all tongue-tied now. Middle school teacher here. When you put your hand in front of your mouth to talk to whisper to a friend, I can tell, and your voice isn't nearly as quiet as you think it is, so I can hear what you're saying too. When you're staring at your crotch and giggling every once in a while, I know you're texting or on social media, but sometimes I don't say anything because that's the only time you're not disrupting the rest of the class. When I do take your phone away until the end of the day, I hand it over to the dean who checks all your texts and social media accounts you're logged into. We bust your friends by checking who you're texting during school hours and email their teachers so they can just coincidentally notice their phone. When you're out for a family emergency for a week and come back with a tan and a tourist t-shirt, I know you're lying, especially when this is the third time in 2 years your grandmother has died. Seriously, please come up with something that doesn't insult my intelligence quite so much. You did understand your homework, you just didn't prioritize accomplishing it. The kids that didn't understand but tried used the 20 different tools I provided to assist you with it, and brought it to me before or at the beginning of class, not when I asked you to turn it in. Also, the dean and counselor fill me in on all your behavior and home issues. The nurse, who really is supposed to keep your medical issues private, is the biggest gossip in the school. Last of all, when you screw up and I have to call you on it, just acknowledge and or apologize. I don't want to reprimand you or correct you any more than you want it, but it's part of my job. It's annoying to call your parents and fill out the paperwork when you screw up big. I won't turn it into a big deal unless you escalate it to a point that I have to do something about it. Well, based on the information that this person is giving, it sounds like this school has it on lockdown. I mean, it seems kind of invasive in some ways, but like they said, you're not supposed to have your phone out in class. I used to be in IT, but had a very messy divorce a couple of years back, and I now teach English in international schools in Japan. We all have school-issued computers with a integrated social network, and I can see all of the messages that the students send, even the private ones, to monitor online bullying, and I am not to let anyone know that I can see students' private messages. I got curious and started spying on them full-time. I learned about a couple of serious relationships between my class and one heterosexual and one homosexual, as well as learning that one of my students has a serious crush on me. Another came out of the closet, but everyone knew already, and then ended up dating a classmate. One girl went completely MIA, and all of us, including me, assumed she had deleted herself. I started getting strange emails about her death, but it turned out she had simply moved away, and all of the kids knew I was spying on them. I live and teach high school kids in a small town, and one of my students, just this total sweetheart, wonderful girl, is dating the scariest guy I have ever seen. Huge dude, lots of tattoos and piercings, way older than her, drives a souped-up deathmobile around town, that kind of thing. Just all around a sketchy guy. It's big school gossip. Everybody knows and talks about it all the time. This student definitely enjoys the attention and always drops hints about what a bad boy he is. Late one night, on a school night, I pulled into a convenience store parking lot to pick up a few things and notice his car there. They walk out of the store together and get back in the car with ice cream. He picked her up from school and bought her ice cream, and they were just sitting in his car being adorable and sweet. When I got out of my car to go to the store, I could hear that they were listening to show tunes. Best part, we ended up driving out of the parking lot at the same time, and the guy spotted me and gave me the friendliest hi ever. Don't judge a book by their cover, I suppose, but it's kind of worrying when kids in high school are dating people who are significantly older and not even in education anymore. I mean, heck, I remember one guy who got absolutely roasted when he was in year 11 because he was dating a year 7. So that's like, an 11 to 12-year-old dating a 16-year-old, which is definitely sketchy. Middle school teacher in a pretty rough school here. I know about their parents, illegal substances, unemployment, or legal problems from data our school is given, and from the parents outright telling me during phone calls or meetings. It's crazy and kind of trustworthy what the parents offer up to me. I've had them tell me, and the school counselor too, that so-and-so cousin was murdered in front of them last week, that's why they've been gone, or there's a lot of kids being bad touched. One kid I recall finally had enough and pulled a gun on his dad, after being molested for probably years. It's hard to get them to work diligently after that. I also can't tell certain kids that their moms, who probably are just a few years older than me, made a pass at me before they knew I wasn't single. I'm a swim instructor, and I know if my students play the piano. How? Well, they swim their front crawl with piano hands until I correct them. What are piano hands? Piano hands are when the index, middle, and ring fingers are together but the thumb and pinky are extended outward, a good habit for someone who might need to hit a high or low note. I also have a psych degree, and my understanding for why this happens is due to interference from similar neural substrates in the cerebellum. I also have had a student with flute hands, and my boss has hockey hands. You should see the look on my students' face when I tell them I know they play the piano. They think I'm psychic. I used to work as a substitute. I learned more than I ever wanted to about the kids I taught. More often than not, I wanted to switch from whatever lecture I was on to one about the concept of plausible deniability. You want to talk to your buddy about how much devil's lettuce you smoked and how many loose women you got with? Great, do it somewhere else. I'm required to inform security and the office about that stuff. Yes, I will still do it even if your cousin is a gangster and will pop a cap in me. Kids in juvenile detention schools just have no sense of plausible deniability. We'll call him Ted. We had a food drive last semester before Thanksgiving for about 2 months. We made a huge basket of canned food, things to make pies, stuffing, sides, bought a turkey, and as a staff voted for what students' family needed it the most. We all agreed that Ted's family, without question, needed it the most. A teacher had to pay for his uniform early on in the year. So he was told close to Thanksgiving by administration that someone would be delivering a basket to his house that afternoon. I guess he was overwhelmed and didn't ask questions then, because he came to my class and asked me, "Is that the food we've been raising for poor people?" I didn't know what to say. I said, "Some of it." "So was it a random thing that I'm getting the basket?" I knew what he was asking, so I said, "Oh my goodness, you won?" He acted surprised. I said, "Man, I'm jealous. They put a basket together with the food left over they didn't donate and picked one person from our program in a drawing and you must have won it." He was totally pumped. Before my class was over, I went to his next 4 classes and told the teachers to play along with the raffle story. They did. He doesn't know. Still a little annoyed that the admin told him. I feel like it could have been a left at the front door sort of thing. I love food drives and little stories like this. It really does warm my heart. The amount of crap I overhear is ridiculous. I know which of my students hosts all the parties and who made out and or hooked up with whom at said parties. I know who does the illegal substances. I know who does the illegal substances and doesn't think that the teachers know they do the illegal substances. I know that one of my students gives crappy BJs to a student in another one of my classes. I know who cheats on everything. Sometimes it's the goody two-shoes kid. I know that at least 3 students have agreed that they would totally tap that, meaning me. They think I'm oblivious. I have excellent hearing. Being a teacher, it would be really uncomfortable if students were just talking about what they'd want to do with you like that a lot. That would be really like, oof. I was a TA to the same teacher for 4 years in high school. I was really uptight at the time and asked her why she didn't mind when the same dude left class every single day with the pass for at least 20 minutes. My teacher said it was because he was making out with his girlfriend in the stairwell closet, and so help her God if I interrupted them because she was the best he was ever going to get. Teachers know your stuff, man. That teacher's a real one. Such a good wingman. I'm not currently teaching, but when I was a student teacher, what I was surprised to find out right away, and all you who are still in high school should know this, is how easy it is to tell when you're being lied to. I mean, teenagers are terrible at lying. I absolutely knew when I was being lied to. But here's the thing, kids. If they don't call you out on your lie, it's not because you succeeded in being convincing, it's because you're probably the 50th person that day to do so, and it's seriously just not worth the effort over something small. This one girl would ask to go to the bathroom almost every day to see her boyfriend who had a different lunch than she did. She'd usually be gone only 5 or 10 minutes, so I frequently let her do so. I used to do exactly the same thing in school, so I know how it is. She did her work, so she earned my discretion on that case. Pro tip, if you give, you get. Put in the effort and you will have bargaining chips. Also, I just want you guys who are still in school to know this. Your teachers know how to keep a professional distance, but they are not robots and they are not blind. They see what's going on with you and they care. I cried at least once a week over my students. I only taught for a short time and now, 2 years later, I remember all my students' names, would recognize them on sight and remember who made me cry. Oh no, not that tactic. I always hate it when people don't yell at you for doing something wrong, but they're just like, "I'm disappointed." And it's like, no, don't do this to me. That they're in gangs and which gangs they're in. Really, you ask to borrow a pen, but you don't want to write with the one I give you because it's blue? You can't sit in a blue chair, but you're not in a gang? Nah. It's actually really sad. I've only been teaching for 5.5 years and 2 of my former students have already been killed in gang-related violence. Middle school ESL teacher here. For the first month, I didn't tell my students I spoke Spanish. I'm white. In that month, I heard more about my butt than I ever wanted to know. Also some gossip, love lives, hate for school, the usual. How did my students not know that I speak Spanish if I'm an ESL teacher? The majority of ESL teachers, i.e. American teachers in China, Japan, or other Asian countries, do not know the native language. The accepted practice for ESL instruction is called English immersion. It basically means that all class time will be in the desired second language, in this case, English. ESL teachers use instructional methods such as TPR, fancy way of saying hand motions and body language, and other such methods to help level 1 students learn the basics. You'd be surprised how much you can learn by just pointing to things and saying the English word for it. How did I finally tell them? I did a class at the end of the month on the differences between English and Spanish. In Spanish, I just acted like nothing was different, asking questions in Spanish and instructing in Spanish. A more glorious feeling would be hard to find. How did they react? Jaws dropped, chaos ensued. Several students asked me if I spoke Spanish. I said in Spanish something like, "How could I speak Spanish? I'm a gringa." 2 students apologized after class for saying inappropriate things in class, and one particular vocal student ran out of the room and allegedly tossed his cookies in the bathroom. Hilarity ensued. Needless to say, I now have a great relationship with my students, and they know not to mess around when I'm in the room. I'm a high school teacher and have a class Twitter that my students can follow for homework updates, links to presentations, quizzes, etc. I told my students, don't ask me to follow you on Twitter because I won't. Not only do I not have the time to read your tweets, there are some things I just do not want to know. Your personal lives are one of them. I lied. After about 40 students followed, I went and snooped on every single one of their profiles and read all of their tweets. So much regret. So much. So what you're saying is you're a liar. One thing I know for sure is when my students are high. I've smoked quite a bit back in the day and therefore know all the symptoms and lingo. I totally mess around with them when they are stoned, not only because it is hilarious, but also in hopes to discourage them from smoking before coming to school. If I know it becomes a problem with any of them, then I will have the serious discussion about how you may not remember what you and your buddies talked about all those times when you were high, but you will sure as hell remember whether or not you passed my class. But for the most part, the stoners don't come to class too often and wait until after school. Teachers have huge amounts of access to students' information. We gossip more than students do. We know everything. Who hooked up with who on camp, the weekend, and the holidays. We know about makeups, breakups, and everything in between. We know who smokes. We know who is doing the illegal substances and who is getting up to mischief. We know kids' asexual and gender orientation, sometimes before they do. It's mostly just from listening in class. Kids seem to think that teachers can't hear personal conversations or that we don't pay any mind to them. We do. Working at a high school is like living on the set of a soap opera. I still can't believe how devastated I was when my favorite couple of 2012 broke up. It was torturous. You know what? I get it. You've probably not got much going on. You're just doing your work. And it's like, all the little bits of drama and whatever you hear is just a little bit of entertainment in the day to get you through work and keep you occupied, I guess. My boyfriend is an elementary school teacher and he says that he knows way more about students' personal lives than they think. Like their parents tell them their problems with poverty, immigration and stuff. Meanwhile, some of the kids are like, I went to Cabo for summer break, or parents' private jet, and he's just like, awesome. Why don't you write a journal entry about it? As a student, I was close with the student teacher at the time. I liked a boy and he told me not to go for him because he had gotten in trouble before with child smut and illegal substances. No idea how he knew that. That does sound like the kind of thing that people would need to be notified about. I mean, I know someone who actually worked in care and they had to, they were offered the job to escort someone who had at one point molested a child, and because they were special needs, they needed someone to go with them to college. And this person in question, who I know, after being informed about what the dirty diddler did, they outright refused to do the job. I'm pretty sure something as severe as anything to do with children, a crime like that is going to be told to anyone that has to deal with them on a regular basis in a professional manner. When I teach undergrads, it's painfully obvious which ones are dating each other, even if it's a secret. I recently taught a required course for freshmen, and one of my students would give me outlandish excuses for not having been in class. He had a breakup, 2 dead relatives, and was flown across the world to save his family business, all in 1 semester. Oddly enough, his work was pretty good. I had to sit him down and explain that I really didn't care where he had been as long as he was showing up to reviews with completed projects, and that a long-winded explanation was unnecessary. The look on this teenager's face when I told him, I'm going to be out today, was perfectly reasonable, priceless. As for when I'm teaching graduate students, I definitely do know hardly any of you little buggers have read the material beyond a thesis statement, unless you're PhD students sitting in on a master's level seminar, and in that case, I do know that you love the sound of your own voice more than Frank Reynolds loved rum ham. So shut up, you're ruining the class for the people who actually need it. Inner city middle school teacher here, I know everything my students gossip about during class. No, not because I have supersonic teacher ears, as many of my students suspect. No, not because that smoke detector in the corner is actually a camera, as I convinced them of earlier this year. It's because kids can't whisper worth a damn. Also, privacy settings. Seriously, kids, use them. Not to mention, those kids I had in class 2 years ago who come by my classroom to visit and make small talk every day after school. Yeah, they keep me more in the loop than most of the students. Sometimes it pays to be the cool teacher. But how sad it is when the cool teacher eventually grows up or gets promoted and then becomes the regular teacher. I understand your jokes. I just pretend that I don't. When I was a student, I would marvel at how my teachers could fail to understand the brilliant asexual innuendo I would use that would have my classmates snickering while they, the instructor, looked on without comprehending. Now I hear 18-year-old girls in my class make the same kinds of comments, and as a 36-year-old dude, my brain immediately begins flashing warning lights and sirens. So I play really dumb because I'm just not going to go there. And that is probably, honestly, for the best. High school teacher here. Regarding students' personal lives, it's very much a need-to-know basis. I don't really give a damn that you party on the weekends, get high after school with your buddies, or anything like that. The thing is that as teachers, we're mandated reporters for a lot of things. The less you know about stuff like that, the better. No teacher snoops Facebook for this very reason. If I see a student ripping a bong on their profile picture, I have to do something about it. That and perusing Facebooks of 14 to 18-year-olds is creepy as hell. What I do know is the stuff I think is necessary. Which students come from disadvantaged backgrounds? Who comes from a two-parent home? Behavior and academic histories? The last thing you want to do is call home. A woman answers the phone, and you assume it's a kid's mom when it's their sister who doubles as their primary caretaker. You don't want to tell kids that they should go on the school field trip and they come from a very low-income home. A lot of kids probably assume teachers don't know stuff like this, but most of us go out of our way to make sure they do. I also know which teacher's classes you're a butthole in. You don't really want to say anything about that to the kid either, because frankly, some teachers are buttholes and they have it coming. What did you totally misunderstand as a kid? When I was a child, we would go on a plane every time we'd visit Mexico, so I assumed Mexico was actually located in the sky. What? I used to believe that when you turned off the TV, it would pause. Was really upset when I would come back from dinner and my show would be over. That's so cute. I thought it was Pizza Hot, not Pizza Hut, until I was about 16 years old. I feel like such a douchebag laughing at these. Okay, I'll do one myself. When I was a really young boy, I didn't think we lived in England. I thought we lived in America because of all the American television I would watch, because I was a dumb butt. I would literally insist to my family, no, we live in America. We have dollars. I don't know why. I just didn't want to believe them. Oh, this one's going to be fun. SX. I had a massive misunderstanding of SX that could have severely injured my adult life had it not been corrected. When I was younger, I was obsessed with biology and animals, so I knew how everything fit together. But those damn Hollywood movies messed up my perception of how humans actually did the horizontal limbo. In movies, couples get all hot and heavy. The screen fades to black and they wake up naked together. I guess I filled in the blanks with my 7-year-old brain and thought that after you got aroused, you just fell asleep naked together. And the penis just sort of autopiloted itself over to the vagina, threw up and snaked back. So when people said they were sleeping together, I took this literally. Made for an awkward encounter with my dad when I was 12, when I suggested he just go to sleep with pants on instead of getting a vasectomy. I thought that when you grew up, you got a special card that allowed you to go to the bank and have some money printed when you needed some at the ATM. And when I heard about guerrilla warfare on TV, I thought it meant that there was an army of really angry guerrillas in other countries starting wars. I used to think that kidnapping was kids taking naps. I was very surprised as a kid to find out babies weren't pooped out and women had more than one hole. that if you got shot anywhere on your body, you would automatically die. I thought you had to marry someone who was born on exactly the same day as you were. I thought that God punished bad people and rewarded good people. Boy, was I wrong. When my parents used to talk about how things were black and white when we were watching TV, I thought they were talking about the whole world was black and white and wanted to know how everything was colored to what it is now. I had pictures of people painting grass in my head and thought this was the way the world was now colored. That'd be really trippy. One day you're like walking along and you see some grass that's just freshly grown in and it's all black and white, and then some people in a black van come in with a paintbrush and bucket and like paint over it, and they look at you and they're like, shh. The concept of race. In the second grade, there was this little poetry contest, and the prompt was to write about the human race. I wrote about a bunch of people running. You know what? I think we'd all be better off if we just thought like this young man once did. I thought the actors actually died when they died in movies. Okay, no, I get that one. I totally get that. I mean, I remember being such a little dummy. I remember liking Star Wars, loving Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when my mom told me, oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the old man as well, you know, I'm like, no, he's not. Obi-Wan Kenobi's young and cool. I think really I didn't want to believe that he then turned into an old man and died. When 9/11 happened, I thought that the reason my morning cartoons weren't showing was because a plane had crashed into the building that made the cartoons. I thought the island Martha's Vineyard was owned by Martha Stewart. When I was about 9, Nickelodeon advertised a Nick Takes Over Your School contest. The commercial was filled with kids playing games, teachers getting slimed, etc. I was terrified that my school might win. Nick would take over for a full school year and that everyone would get held back a year since there didn't appear to be any learning going on in the commercials. The Civil War. Little kid version of me couldn't understand why America was fighting over forks, knives, and spoons. What do they mean by that? Like, does anyone have an explanation for that? Please do say. I thought the car somehow knew whether we would turn left or right. I was amazed by those turn signals. Why Walt Disney wrote his last name with a backwards G. It does totally look like it says Gisney. Or would it be Gisney? That $20 was a lot of money. I thought firemen burned down buildings. This was because when I was 5 or so, our neighbors sold or donated their house to the fire department to help trainees. So every day for like a week, the fire department showed up and lit the house on fire. I guess I somehow missed the part where they then put the fire out. So for years, I was scared of firemen and thought they set houses on fire. It didn't come out until sometime later my parents gave me the whole, if anything bad happens, call the fire department talk. When I was young, I knew people did things on purpose when they meant to do them. I thought the word was unpurpose, though, and so naturally the opposite of unpurpose was purpose. Once in first grade, I was sent to the principal and I kept insisting that I had committed said offense purposely. I thought Harry Potter was about bunny rabbits because Beatrix Potter wrote Peter Rabbit, so by the laws of word association, it was a series of books about little rabbits going on adventures with their friends. Ah, the word association game is a boy. Yes, I'm familiar with it. I remember not knowing that all the Final Fantasy games were set in different universes up to a point, except for when they decided that it was going to be a sequel, whatever. And I just assumed that any blonde main character that I saw was like Cloud with a different haircut because Cloud was the first protagonist I knew about in the franchise. I used to think people died on their birthday because the headstones I had seen didn't have months and days, just how many years. There were 2 boys in my pre-K class named Juan and Raj. I called them Juan and Garage instead. No wonder they never shared their toys with me. I thought there was a government agency called the Management for Your Protection because toilet seat cover dispensers always said, provided by the management for your protection. Whenever I was in the car with my parents while stuck in a traffic jam, I would wonder why the person first in line was going so slow. If only that jerk sped up, we would all move faster. Oh, I've been there. I was convinced that white dog poop in the backyard was dinosaur fossils, and I believed that my dad fought a guy in a boxing ring to win my mom. I was staying at my friend's house for the day once and had one of those annoying sneezes that just don't come out no matter how hard you try. I told my friend about it and he told me that if I had a sneeze stuck and I couldn't get it out that I could die. Of course this screwed with my 8-year-old brain pretty hard. Never did die. I didn't know the difference between the words grape and rake and used them interchangeably. I'm not talking about actual grapes. I don't know if that translates well because of the censors. At around 10, I started changing my new little brother's diapers. My little brother was circumcised, so whatever. Being a 10-year-old little girl, I don't see much penis. One day, I changed my little cousin's diaper, and I'm totally concerned with the way his junk looks, only to find out years later that he was uncircumcised. I used to think cancer was when your eyes got swirly things in them and your head spun around endlessly. No clue where that idea came from. When I was little, I would hear commercials advertising things for just $5.99. I used to think they meant $5.99. I would tell my parents that I wanted to buy it because I had enough money, and they were always pretty amused. Like everything. One thing I can remember is that I thought the USA national anthem went like, "By the dawn's early light," instead of "By the dawn's early light," as though dawn's-early was just another one of those many words I was familiar with as a kid. I thought it was maybe an adjective, like the orange glow of the morning sun cast a dawn's-early mood over the park. I also thought as a very young kid that when you were fired from your job, the company killed you. I also thought dawn's-early was a word because I thought that's how they said it in the American national anthem. Once again, only knowing the American national anthem because I watched so many TV episodes from American shows like The Simpsons. My parents used to take me on vacation when I was younger, and we'd leave out of Newark, New Jersey airport. When taking off, you can see Bayonne, New Jersey, and it's all docks and cranes and ships. One time, I pointed out the window to the cranes and asked my father what that place was. He said, Bayonne, and until I was about 18 years old, I thought no person lived there, only worked there. I imagined it was just cranes and ships and docks. There was an infomercial for some kind of griddle. All I remember was people tapping a frozen hamburger patty or frozen chicken breast on the griddle, and it swipes to the next shot of the food fully thawed and cooking. I thought you had to tap the food on the griddle to turn it on. Oh no, Sonny, that's just a fun editing trick someone decided to do. When I was a kid, I had a book. In this book, a character moves to a new town. To do this, the family has the house lifted up and placed on the back of a truck and driven to an empty piece of land in the new town. I was convinced that this is what happened whenever anyone moved. What really got me was that other than this, the book was really plain and normal. See Jim Run type stuff. It wasn't some kind of fantasy book or anything. We moved from a decent house with no yard to a trailer with a nicely sized yard. I was confused but thought it was just taking a long time for our house to arrive. No, we just had to actually live in the trailer. Biracial babies. I thought they would come out swirled. I don't know if this is controversial to say, but that sounds cool. Why my parents, when together, ever needed privacy. I thought I was supposed to sprout a second penis to match my two balls. I don't know if anyone remembers the kids' voices that answered the questions that Steve asked on Blue's Clues. Well, I thought those were just other kids that were watching the show at the same time, like there was some kind of microphone on the TV that would pick up my voice, and other kids watching would hear. So I used to whisper dirty words into my TV real quiet with my hands cupped around my mouth so my mom wouldn't hear, but the other kids watching would. I thought the lyrics to Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC were Dirty Deeds and the Thunder Chief. You know what? I'm pretty sure that I also grossly misheard that song and thought it said something else as well. I overheard my mom and dad talking about having to fire someone. I thought it meant they were going to set him on fire. The fact that they were upset and serious about it added to the illusion. I thought I must have two stomachs, one for food and one for drinks. How else would the food know to come out one hole and the drinks out another? When I was 5 in 1996, I thought for some reason that 1997 was 1,000 years in the future. So one day, my parents were watching local news, and there was a story on a golf course that would be completed in 97. And my thought was, you idiots, we'll all be long dead by then. Why does a golf course matter? When I was a kid and my mom didn't want me to watch something on TV, she would tell me that it was a scary show or scary movie. Well, I somehow got it in my head that the 2001 Planet of the Apes film was the single most terrifying movie ever made. I didn't see it until I was about 11 or 12 and then understood my mom's parenting techniques. I mean, good lord, I would not want to have to live through the ape-human war. God, that'd be terrifying, horrible. Why women's bodies didn't return to the former state immediately after giving birth. I told my mom she was still fat as we were leaving the hospital after she had my sister. Damn, kid. Harsh. My boyfriend told me this. Backstory. He was raised by a single mom and had 2 siblings. So my boyfriend overheard a conversation with his mom and babysitter. Apparently, they had a mutual friend who had a few kids. His mom sarcastically says, if she shakes hands with a guy, she'll get pregnant. Being a child, my boyfriend was obviously horrified. It took his mom a long while to figure out why he wouldn't shake hands when meeting people. My cousin had a chore chart of different categories like bedroom, bathroom, etc. The last category was labeled miscellaneous, and I always thought she had a neighbor that she did chores for, and her name was Miss Alanius. Childbirth. I thought my dad would be able to have babies. They still have a good chuckle every time they tell that story. Marriage. I thought you had to find someone with the same last name to get married. It didn't help my parents didn't correct me on it. More so because they have different last names and were common law married until it was abolished a few years ago. I figured my parents were rebels. It's not the weirdest assumption kids have made about what constitutes getting married or how you get married, I guess. Autism. I always thought autism was like a license to drive cars. Autoism. I believe that you had to get diagnosed with autism by a doctor so that you were fit to drive. Makes sense, right? On television, informative autism commercials would constantly air and there would be a test crash dummy impacting a car. I thought that if you didn't have autism, you wouldn't be able to drive and you would get into an accident and turn into a crash test dummy. It all made sense a few years ago. I still don't have my license. I was 17 when I learned my favorite animal, the jackalope, wasn't real. I totally get that. It is mundane enough, it is plausible enough that it's like, yeah, that could be real. I think I might have been around the same age or older. I was 50-50 for a while though. I remember saying to my friend, hey, a jackalope's real? And he even looked at me and was like, I don't think they are they? And we both looked it up on the internet. And so, yeah, rabbit with antlers, it's plausible. I get it. I have a couple that I have my parents to blame for. They made me think that you can unlock the car by voice command and always got me to shout, unlock, as they would unlock it with their remote. Sadly, this went on for much longer than it should have. Second, when I would be at my mom's work, she would tell me to cover my eyes completely with my hands while she made photocopies of any documents because she said I would go blind. I think I was between 5 and 8 years old. They make fun of me from time to time, but I apparently had no reason to not trust my parents. Back when I was a little one, about 4 or 6 years old, I was forced to go to Sunday school. During our Sunday school sessions, we would all sit around a large lady talking about Jesus and all of his crazy antics. I wasn't much for listening, but knew I should probably get some key facts in case I am asked what I learnt in Sunday school. This particular session, we were learning about Adam and Eve. To summarize the tale, there is an apple which caused bad things to happen when you eat it, and 2 naked people. Anyway, fast forward to the next weekend where our family is hosting a family get-together. South American families have a lot of relatives. As my mother is showing people around our yard, she plucks out an apple. I smack it out of her hand and proceed to explain why she couldn't eat the apple. I had gotten the notion that somehow Adam and Eve became naked by eating the apple, and there was no way in hell I wanted to see my mother naked. Anyway, to this day, I can't eat apples in peace around my family without some sort of wisecrack. You should have paid better attention. It kind of reminds me, though, of how one time me and my friend got through a class where we were learning about the book Great Expectations, where we didn't actually read the book, but instead we referenced the episode of South Park where they did Great Expectations by subtracting and deducing what was too crude to be legitimate for the original work, and we actually got through the class really well. My dad was such a terrible highway driver that when we went on our annual vacation, he inevitably got into a car accident, usually a minor fender bender. I thought that every trip needed to include an accident and would pester him while on the road. When's the accident going to happen? When's it gonna happen? What is wrong with you? I'm just picturing like the insurance agent, the police, every year on that day, on that annual trip, it's like, well, it's gonna happen inevitably. This guy's gonna call up and, or whatever, or someone's gonna call up about them, and the police are like, he's coming. I know he is. He's never let me down. Thought drinking and driving referred to any type of beverage, so when my uncle took a Coke for the road, I was shocked. I'd always heard that you could only survive a couple days without drinking water. Well, I stayed with my southern grandparents for likely 2 weeks. During that time, I drank nothing but iced tea. I was really worried I was going to die soon. I thought Albert Einstein created and gave life to a monster called Frank Einstein, and that's why he was considered a genius. I thought when you moved somewhere, you had to find a person in that town who needed to move to your town and then swap homes with them. When people said, "I'm serving so my kids don't have to," I assumed that meant your kids were forced into the military if you didn't do it? Kids are literal. That'd be a terrifying prospect for certain. I didn't realize John Lennon was a different person than Lenin, the Soviet premier, as the names are pronounced almost the same and both had a huge impact in the 20th century. The world made a lot more sense once that one got cleared up. Before I ever had the talk, I inferred that babies were in fact made when two people kiss and their germs mix. I wasn't that far off. I didn't understand that TV shows were recorded, so when I saw the actors jumping in age from young to old and vice versa in the span of a week, I thought it was some type of wizardry. I'm surprised I haven't seen one saying, "I thought the cartoons were like in or behind the TV and I just had to like catch them when they were off guard or something." I was raised very Catholic. For some reason, I thought a person's torso was called their body, so when I learned that when people die, their bodies stayed on earth while the rest of them went to heaven, I thought upon death a person's head, arms, and legs flew off and went into the sky. I also thought people had funerals for torsos. It was pretty metal. What a charming mind you must have. I mean that legitimately, by the way. I thought for a very long, almost too long time that an only child was pronounced lonely child because they had no siblings. When I was in pre-K, I was walking down the hall to recess, just chilling out with one of my friends, when I saw one of those handprints made out of paper with a student's name on it. You know, the ones you have all your kids make and then you put them on your door. Anyways, the name on this one was Jesus. Hey, look, Jose, there's a kid named Jesus. It's Jesus. I've read my children's Bible 5 times. I think I know how to say Jesus. No, it's a Mexican name. You just say the J like H, like with my name. Jose does not have a J. I know how to spell my name, man. And I know how to spell Jesus. We fought about it for at least 5 minutes. I was not a fun kid. I thought everyone lived to the exact same age, like my brother taunted me for being 3 years younger than him, but in my mind it was no sweat because I was going to be alive for 3 more years after he died. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's also a thought that passed through my mind at one point or another. At least, it sounds weirdly familiar to me. I misunderstood cardinal directions. I thought north was always in front of me. I misunderstood my family taking me to see the circus. I thought all the animals and people were there to see me. I misunderstood cashiers. I thought they had all that money and items. I misunderstood SX, despite learning about it from a book that was supposed to scientifically show it in the way kids understand. I thought a giant sperm climbs up the woman's leg as the couple holds hands. Certainly, if that were the way that it went, I don't think anyone would be interested in doing the deed. People just said, "He died for your sins," over and never explained what that meant, as if it was obvious. It's not. But I wasn't born yet. He died for your sins. As punishment for my sins? Or he died for your sins? For me or for the sins? He died for your sins. So does that mean it's okay to sin? He died for your sins. So am I forgiven or he died for your sins? Please explain that phrase, Mom. Until Jesus died, sins could not be forgiven. Because of the ritual sacrifice, sins can now be forgiven. This may or may not apply to people who sinned before his death. Why didn't God just say, "Okay, I forgive sins now"? Jesus died! Sorry! When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.